Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's board meeting, including those joining us via live stream. It's great to be back here in Columbia once again. To begin our meeting today, I'd like to ask Curator Holbrook to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Would you all stand, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Cindy, can you verify that we have Julia online or by live stream?
Yeah, she texted us and said she won't be joining till closer to the governance committee.
Okay, understood. Okay, we'll begin the meeting today with the chair's report. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking President Choi and the University of Missouri for hosting our board meeting here in Columbia today. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that this is a hard day for many as we proceed through this meeting in the absence of our student representative, Remington Williams. Remington tragically lost his life in a car accident earlier this month. Many attended and remembered Remington last week at a service in Kansas City and at a reception at UMKC. We also plan to recognize him at the conclusion of our public session today. We know his participation with the Board of Curators was very important to Remington, as it was for all of us. Later, we will take a few minutes of this official meeting to commemorate his life and giving spirit, as well as his contributions to this board. We obviously will not have a student report for this meeting, which is customary after presentations from me and President Choi. During my report, I usually highlight the excellent work of our faculty and student collaborations. Before I get to that, I want to note an anniversary. Today is the 50th anniversary of Title IX. The historic law reshaped collegiate athletics by providing new opportunities for women in sports. Since then, female athletes have demonstrated their incredible abilities in a variety of sports. Access to education and scholarships have helped more women compete, complete degrees, and better themselves through education. The NCAA and SEC are celebrating this milestone anniversary throughout the year. Since today is the actual anniversary of the signing of the bill, it is a good time to recognize the progress in this area and the exciting future of women's sports. I know we're all proud of the women who compete for our universities, and I encourage everyone to attend their events and support them. And I'd like to tell you about some of the talented professors who are collaborating with their students on research. First, I'd like to recognize Nicole Campione-Barr, Professor of Psychological Sciences and Director of the Honors Capstone Program in Psychological Sciences. Her research has supported Kismet Oaktree, majoring in psychology and minoring in sociology, criminal and juvenile justice, and social justice, and Marissa Levy, who majored in psychology and minored in human development and family studies. Ms. Oaktree was honored with the University of Missouri Award for Academic Distinction. Oaktree is the second awardee from Dr. Campione-Barr's lab in the 9 years the award has been given. Next from Missouri S&T are Drs. Joel Birkin and Marie Alami. Dr. Birkin is a Curators Distinguished Professor and Chair of Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering. Dr. Alami is a postdoctoral researcher in environmental engineering. Their research supports Shelby Ply, Catherine Selness, Alicia Davis, and Belle Pham. Shelby, Catherine, and Alicia are all environmental engineering students, and Catherine is enrolled to earn her master's degree. Belle is an architectural engineering student. UMKC's Spotlight Professor is Dr. Erin Albabuman of the School of Dentistry. Her research is funded by the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, helps to support Claire Houchin, who is seeking a Master's of Science in Bioinformatics and intends to apply to doctoral programs, thanks in large part to Dr. Booman's support. And finally, from UMSL, I want to highlight Dr. Badri Adhikari. His current project is funded by the National Science Foundation and supports Amula Laku, a graduate student in the computer science program. These examples of mentorship and collaboration truly show the incredible experiences our students have under the guidance of our scholars at all 4 universities. This concludes my report. Thank you. I now turn it over to President Choi for the President's report.
Thank you, Chair Chapman. It's my pleasure to provide an update of important activities at the University of Missouri system. First, I want to congratulate the 12,939 graduates that received degrees at the 4 universities. We had wonderful celebrations at all 4 campuses, and including Kauffman, the Royals Baseball Stadium. And one of those graduates was Remington Williams, who received his degree in law from UMKC. We wish all of our students great success, and we are comforted in knowing that we have prepared our students to be successful in life because of the education and the nurturing environment that our faculty members and staff have provided. Some leadership updates. I'm not going to go through each one, but you can see that ranging from system leadership through the appointment of the Hugh E. and Sarah D. Stevenson Dean, Dr. Rick Barron, as well as leadership changes throughout all 4 campuses. And we congratulate them, and we look forward to their many contributions for us to achieve the mission of the university. The total support from the state of Missouri is always gratefully acknowledged. We know that it is funds that come from the taxpayers of the state, so we take our responsibilities as fiduciaries very, very seriously. And over the past 10 years, as you can see, we've seen some ups and downs. And this is the total that we received, which is appropriations less withholds. But during the past 3 years, we made significant gains because of what we are contributing to the state of Missouri. And that's reflected in not only the governor's proposed budget, but the final budget that is passed by both houses, as well as the governor's signature. So we're grateful for that support, and we take that very, very seriously. This year, we had a total of $464 million in state core appropriations. And it is broken down into the different core areas that really indicate the unique nature of the 4 universities within the state of Missouri. The educational core is $263 million, which is primarily for undergraduate education. And then there's a carve-out for first professional doctorates that we only offer in the state of Missouri as public institutions, the research and development core, which is a very important core. And as I indicate in the bullets below, the total expenditures of research at the 4 universities is $487 million. The total combined for all other public research universities and research is $20 million. That shows the scope and magnitude of our activities. The land-grant core, through the excellent work of Dr. Marshall Stewart. I had a little bit of a brain freeze. I see Marshall right there. Dr. Marshall Stewart, we were able to get a carve-out of $28 million in the extension and engagement core that serves all 4 universities and all 114 counties. The UM system produces 48% of all degrees in the state of Missouri, undergraduate. How does that compare? Well, here is the ranking that shows that the University of Missouri system provides excellent value given the level of support. In terms of the degrees that are produced and the appropriations, the educational core, as you can see, the UM average, the average is the lowest. And as you can see from the list below, Missouri S&T, because of its focus on engineering and science and the expense that it takes, is a little bit higher than the average, but still a great value. We also received from the state $225 million in ARPA funds for 4 very important projects, one at each of our campuses. And we're very thankful once again to the support from the legislators as well as the governor. This past year, we received $111 million in federal support, and I put on there the amount received for the particular purpose and the legislator that was most responsible in sponsoring and stewarding that project through until completion. And as you can see, we received significant funds for the next-gen precision health building, as well as other projects to serve rural medicine and simulation. There's a theme here with Senator Blunt being such an incredible supporter, and we also thank Representative Luke DeMeyer for his support of agriculture in the state. The admissions update is showing up here, and at this point, we don't talk about applications anymore because we're now in the phase of counting how many students have accepted to join the university. And as you can see from the freshman accepts and the transfer accepts, overall at the University of Missouri system, we had a net positive year, and the table below shows the net new students in terms of new first-time college students as well as new transfer students. In terms of faculty success, very briefly, we've had a number of faculty members that have received highly prestigious and prestigious awards. And Blake Myers, who has a joint appointment with the Danforth Plant Sciences Center, is the 12th member of the University of Missouri Columbia to have received the National Academy memberships in the sciences, medicine, or engineering. Gary Abbott is a faculty member of modern dance at UMKC, and he received a very prestigious Guggenheim Fellowship. And Dr. Michael Cosmopoulos, who is a Hellenic Government Caracas Family Foundation Professor of Greek Studies and History, was selected to the very prestigious American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And the teaching that goes on at all four campuses is something that we are very proud of. At Missouri S&T, we have Michelle Schwartz and Beth Kanya Ghosh that received the Missouri Teaching Excellence Awards. We also had a number of events to celebrate staff. First, finally, in person. We've had these virtually during the COVID period, but we want to thank the staff that makes the engine of higher education, research, and engagement possible at our university. So I thank the chancellors for their contributions in making these recognitions very visible and very positive. Now to research, which is very important because we are research universities. We have a carve-out from the state support to support research, creative works, and development. As you can see from here, the total R&D proposals overall at the UM system is increasing. This is very positive, leading indicator. On the total awards, we're also seeing positive increases, despite the fact that during the past 2 years, some of our faculty members were limited in their ability to conduct research because of COVID restrictions. What really counts is expenditures. What are we actually spending on research that we report to the federal government? The NSF HERD data as an example, and we're also increasing in that area. As research universities, we're also focused on competitive federal grants because that is also another measure of the quality of the research because federal competitive projects are evaluated by colleagues and peers who are experts in those fields. So it's a proxy for quality. And as you can see, the system is moving up. I do want to highlight UMKC. In 2018, the expenditures for federal was $9 million. This year, we still have a month to go. They're at $25 million. This is an incredible increase. Now, just like everything else, percentages, if you look at it, you ask, where do you start? What's the base? But despite that base of $9 million, that's an incredible increase. If we continue that level of progress at all four universities, then we are going to become stronger universities when it comes to research. Those are the numbers, but behind each of those numbers, there's a story of faculty members that are working hard with their students, with their colleagues to submit grants. You've seen Dr. Jeanette Berkeley's name quite a number of times because she is that successful in getting NIH grants. And she is working on how to improve accessibility and also exercise and diet to reduce type 2 diabetes in the Kansas City region. And she received a grant from NIH for this purpose. Here at this campus, 2 faculty members that were recruited as part of the Rise Up through the School of Medicine, and now they're part of the Mizzou Forward effort, are Professors Haval Sherwan and Esma Yoku. They've been working with colleagues at Harvard and Georgia Tech for 20 years to develop transplantation of pancreas cells, and they have been demonstrated to produce good results in treating diabetes in large animals. Now, with the large animal studies, their next step is to do a clinical trial on humans so that we can improve the lives of Missourians and those worldwide. At MU, Dr. Pamela Atkins and our very own John Middleton have received a grant from the Department of Agriculture to better understand udder health and productivity of dairy heifers, which is very important. The dairy industry is very important for Missouri's agriculture and Missouri's economy. Dr. Farouk El-Baz graduated from Missouri S&T back in the 60s, and he was tapped with his PhD in geology to be the site selection manager and the trainer of astronauts for the Apollo mission. And he was selected to identify locations on the moon that the lunar module would land. He had incredible contributions. And he's also gone on to become a sci-fi legend with a show that was produced by Tom Hanks, From the Earth to the Moon. And in the Star Trek Next Generation, there's actually a vehicle that they use called El-Baz. But what you see up there is a type of telescope that is attached to the camera that one cannot buy at Best Buy. I mean, that is a very special item that was used to locate exactly the location and topography of the moon. But this is the type of contributions that we've had at our universities. Now, fast forward 53 years, and NASA once again taps the expertise of Missouri S&T to be part of a team that is looking for mining of rare metals, rare materials that can be used. But it has to be done in a sustainable way. And this is led by Dr. Leslie Gersh and the colleagues that you see listed below her. The groundbreaking research at UMSL. Many people don't realize that UMSL's biology department and plant sciences group is part of the Danforth collaboration with the system. And there's incredible work that's going on, especially the one that's supported by Dr. Amy Dunlap, to improve urban agriculture. And she is looking at specifically bee pollination so that we can improve urban agriculture so that we can better serve the needs of those that live in what is called sometimes the food deserts in our inner cities. At UMSL, another very major grant with their expertise in addictions and psychological sciences, Professor Ryan Carpenter has an NIH K-23 award for young investigators for $797,000, and he is combining addiction to alcohol and how that affects relapse for opioid-addicted individuals. So another very important project that serves Missouri. I want to end with the philanthropy slide, and I've had conversations with all 4 chancellors to say that it is critically important to have philanthropy as a central piece of revenue generation through fundraising and developing innovative ideas that will be attractive to potential donors. And as you can see from the slide, we are seeing some bumps from prior years individually, but the incredible gift that Missouri S&T received is just making the scale that much harder to see. But with that success, we know we can continue to make important contributions in philanthropy. So, Chair Chapman, that concludes my report, and I turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for President Choi? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. Next, we have the consent agenda. Are there any questions from the board regarding the consent agenda items as shown in your materials? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion and a second from the board to approve the consent agenda as presented in your materials?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Okay, the next item on our agenda, Curator Holbrook, I'll now turn it over to you for the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you. Is this on? Do I need this on? Push?
Yeah, it's on.
It's on.
Don't push it.
Don't push it.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Chapman. Good morning. The Finance Committee has 8 action items today, so folks, this is going to take a little bit of time. So I'll call on Executive Vice President Ryan Rapp, who will do the presentations today, and we'll start with the fiscal 23 operating budget. He'll present it, and then you'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Curator Holbrook. If we can go to the next slide. As you know, this fall, we reviewed the financial plans with the board, our 5-year financial plans. We went over some of the assumptions at the April meeting, and then included in your materials is the proposed budget for fiscal year 23. Some of the things I'd note is as we work through the budget this year, we've talked about the impacts of inflation. One of the important things to remember is the federal stimulus that helped us through COVID is expiring as we look forward to next year, and we would expect our financial performance to return to levels similar to those we saw during really the pre-pandemic period. It's important that we continue to maintain and manage expense growth within the available revenues that we generated. We are anticipating that we would see some level of growth in state appropriation, tuitions, and grants and contracts. And we are still anticipating growth in top-line revenue for healthcare, but as we touched on in the Health Affairs meeting, we continue to see some challenges in terms of labor costs in the healthcare market and also the payer mix that we see. We do have market and performance salary pools included across all 4 universities, as well as MU Healthcare, but I do want to be clear, we don't have any cost of living adjustments or across-the-board increases proposed. Everything would either be based on market or performance. And then really, after today's budget, if it is approved, we move forward and we really start the same cycle over again, and then in the fall, we would be refreshing our financial plans. Some of the focus as we think about what we need to be working on over the next couple of years would be our capital investment plans and how we do a better job of integrating that into our strategic planning and our financial plans. You can then go to the next chart. So I think this is a question we get is, what is the purpose of the budget? It really is just a plan, and it's a way to hold us as leaders accountable and also helps us understand the financial health of the university. We use it as a guide, but also have to understand that we have flexibility to make changes as needed throughout the year to serve our mission and also preserve the financial health. The board is required to approve our budget on an annual basis, and then we submit quarterly reports regarding our actual performance against those budgets. When we think about the operating budget and what the key metric we're focused on, it's really operating margin. And we're not trying to generate an operating margin so we can put more money in the bank or we can pay a dividend to shareholders, but we absolutely do need margins to underwrite the mission of the university and make those critical investments that we need in research, teaching, in excellence. So it is critical that we maintain a healthy margin as we move forward. This chart was included in your materials, but is just comparing what our financial performance targets are on a consolidated basis, then for each university that were approved in the financial plans, then where we're projecting to end for this year. You can see on a consolidated basis, we're currently anticipating that we would end above target. Then the budgets that we're bringing forward for approval for this year are set at 2.7%, which is slightly above the target. This is just giving you an overview of the key revenue sources that drive our budget. The president went over some of this in detail in his slides. We had a very good year in terms of state support. We appreciate all the support we've received from the legislature and the governor. Our three largest sources of revenue are patient revenue, net tuition fees, and state support. But then as you look, grants and contracts are another large source of revenue for us, and then we have the auxiliary revenues that are another large source of revenue. And that includes things like housing, the bookstore, campus dining. Our athletic programs are included in there as well, which then, when you put it all together, it's a $3.9 billion budget that we're seeking approval for. From an expense perspective, what drives the budget? We are a people-intensive industry. 61% of our budget, when you look at salary and wages and benefits across all funds, is driven by personnel. If you look at our operating budgets and operating fund budget, it's even higher. So again, that is a key driver of our cost profile. As far as our next steps, I went over this in the beginning, but we really then would just reset our financial plans. We'll complete those in the fall. We would review those with the board in February. We'll be looking to really integrate our capital planning more so than it already is into our financial planning. We'll review the targets, discuss with the board if those need to be adjusted, and then that would really serve as the basis for us to start our annual budget process again in the spring of '24. Some of the other things we're going to continue to work on is the new tuition models that we went over in April. Starting at the September meeting, each campus will review their respective plans with the plan to approve those in the spring of 2023. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have regarding the FY23 budget.
Are there any questions for Ryan?
Ryan, I've got a question on the, where your operating margins are on that first couple slides. Can we go back to that? You're right there. So obviously, our target has been pretty consistent over the years. And if you look at, I'm not talking about the hospital as much as the four universities. That 1% operating margin obviously it seems very thin.
Yes.
And if you look at the '23 budget, like for UMSL, it's showing zero. What's the biggest hurdle from UMKC and UMSL getting above that 1% target closer to 2%? Which to me it's still pretty thin, I think.
Yeah, I think this is something we discuss and work on at length, and I think when I'm talking about, wanting to generate margin, it's not to put that money away, but when we say we have these strategic plans that we want to go execute against, we have to have margin to do that. And I think both in UMSL and UMKC's case, what they're targeting is better than where they've been. So we're seeing improvement, but I think both Chancellor Soblik and Chancellor Agrawal would agree that their goal over time is to get that margin closer to 2%. But I think, that's where when we look to set these, why you see some variation even amongst the individual universities is we do have to take kind of the historical context of where they're starting. So I know for UMSL to do what it needs to do, realistically over the next 5 years, we need to get that above 1% and probably closer to 2%. So it is something we absolutely work on. I'll see if either one of them have anything they would like to add.
Thank you for the question, Curator Lehman. We talk about this all the time at the university level with our entire cabinet and team, and our goal is absolutely to generate that above so that we can invest. And we have key parameters that we're working on with Ryan Rapp and his team as well all the time. So one of the things that we're doing this particular year and taking a look at next year is investing in our current personnel so that we can make sure that we can have the wages and salaries that they need. And so that sometimes then takes away from some of the other investments we want to do. So it's always a give and take in a sense with regards to the budget, but we are always looking at the parameters and increasing where we have been. And I think you'll see that where we are now is much improved financial position than where we have been in the past. And we will continue to move in that direction.
So I agree with Chancellor
Sobolik. I think there's short-term investments and long-term investments for growth that we need to make, and sometimes that's the balance we need to strike. And there's more short-term investments than the margin goes down. But we're balancing that, and in the past few years, we have been able to deliver at the end of the year much better margins than the target. So we'll continue to focus on that.
Thank you.
I think to your specific question for AMSL enrollment, getting to kind of a stable enrollment profile for them, seeing some growth and then stabilizing enrollment is critical.
Any other questions or comments for?
I've got Ryan, excuse me, Ryan, on the auxiliary enterprises, especially specifically the housing. With inflation that's really out of control in our country. How are you handling the housing aspect and the increased cost that we'll have with the maintenance of the housing and all the things that are involved, and the charges that we have to our students?
So we set the housing and dining rates in November. We weren't probably tracking inflation quite at that level. Overall, when we look across that portfolio, across all 4 universities, we would expect them to break even this next year. And when I say break even, I'm accounting for, when we talk about auxiliaries, I'm not talking about just covering their operating expense. That is putting money aside for deferred maintenance and ensuring that, we don't get to the end of a 10-year period and we have a housing stock that's out of date. So I would anticipate that, really like all areas, we're going to have some of that inflationary pressure in terms of wages. When it comes to MU specifically, we are really focused on maintaining the housing stock we have. But then we're already doing this to some extent. Any of the additional housing we might need, we're looking to kind of the periphery of campus and working with third parties to provide that for us. So some of it is trying to say, how do we shift some of that risk perhaps to a third party versus holding all of it ourselves?
Are there any other questions? Ryan, I might have one. I'd like to go back to the slide that Jeff had up a second ago. Help me remember, but the projected of the budget of 1% at Mizzou, which is down from target, primarily that's driven by Mizzou Forward, if my memory serves me correct.
Correct.
Yep. No, the board approved Mizzou Forward, and the result of approving Mizzou Forward, we, in essence, approved a lower return for the next 5 years in order to pay for Mizzou Forward. And part of that is using the reserves they built over time because they have been a high performer on this net margin, correct? And have built some reserves?
Correct. And I think I would anticipate while we have a 1% target in the budget that we will exceed that.
Yeah, and that leads me into then my next comment, and I'd like to comment Molly at UMKC because he has taken a wrath of verbal abuse from me over the last 2 years on preparation of the budgets. And each year he has exceeded that performance tremendously. So I am proud to say that I was wrong, and that and I want to compliment UMKC on their efforts financially on their budgets and exceeding what was budgeted and starting to build those reserves back. So thank you, Molly. Are there any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion and a second from the committee to approve the budget as presented by Vice President Rapp?
So moved.
Second.
Need it from the committee.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board that the fiscal year 2023 operating budget for the University of Missouri as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Holbrook.
Thank you, Curator Chapman. The fiscal year 2024 state appropriations request for operation. Ryan, would you please give us an overview?
Yes, thank you, Curator Hobrock. The board is required to authorize the president to submit a state appropriations request for operations. And the president went over some of the results from this last year. We've got a core appropriation of almost $455 million. We're obviously seeking to maintain that. That would have those line items broken out in our core that we talked about of extension of the $27 million, the professional programs of approximately $95 million, and then research of approximately $75 million. We then also are seeking, when we say equity increase, it's an inflationary increase. We would then pursue any state higher ed directives that may come out from the Department of Higher Education. So our total core funding request for the next year that we would plan to submit would be approximately $494 million. Along with that, we have some other programs that were included in your materials, which are some of the line item programs. We have then just legislative requirements such as the debt offset program, which then brings the total request to approximately $519 million for the year. But I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding this request or anything that was contained in the materials.
Are there any questions? Ryan, just for clarity, there is rumor that there may be some ARPA funds available, carryover from last year, available to the governor.
Yes.
And this does not include
This
any ARPA request?
This does not include any ARPA request. Any type of request like that, if it came forward, we would notify the board. We will talk a little bit about it when I get to the state capital appropriation request.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Hearing none. If there's no further discussion, I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve the Missouri fiscal year 2024 state appropriations request for operations as outlined in the materials for this meeting.
So moved. Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board the University of Missouri fiscal year 2024 state appropriations request for operations as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Hobrock.
Thank you, Curator. Chapman, again, Ryan, the state fiscal year 2024 state capital appropriations request, would you please give us
Yes.
outline?
Included in your materials was a brief outline. What we are seeking here today is just authorization for the president to submit this request on behalf of the 4 universities. These projects were all included in the April capital plans that were approved. They do not contemplate any additional ARPA funding being available. That is something when we bring the refresh of the capital plans forward at the September meeting, we would discuss with the board if we thought that was a possibility. What we were focused on for these were the projects that the state was looking to fund maintenance and repair of buildings or facility needs that we had. That's what we're looking to submit through this. Now, if we receive direction that there would be ARPA funding available for new projects, we would look at our capital plans to make those adjustments and discuss those with the board. So for MU, it would be just really the facilities needs and operation reduction projects, so helping underwrite the plan that we already have underway to reduce our space footprint, but then also renovate some of our facilities. And so the amount we would request from the state to do that would be $56 million. For UMKC, it's the Spencer Chemistry and Biological Sciences Building, a $40 million renovation. At S&T, it's Schrank Hall Phase 3, which would be a $52 million renovation. And then at UMSL, it would be the renovation of Stadler Hall, which would be a $38.5 million renovation. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding these projects.
Does anybody from the board or the committee have any questions for?
I do. Will you talk about our FC&I practices? When we looked at April, I saw the pie charts, and it's actually, when I used to attend these meetings once a year, it was one of the things I really enjoyed seeing as we made progress on that. Obviously, we've really been working hard on maintenance with the support of the state. We're taking buildings down at all of our universities and being strategic. But as we get ready to September, can you talk about those practices and how we're going to balance that with the requests and then obviously repairs and maintenance going forward?
Yeah, I think, so the FC&I is our Facilities Conditions Need Index, and we try to target overall across the entire university 0.3. And the higher you go up on that scale, the closer you are to just full replacement or tear down of the building. That is something that when we bring forward the refresh the capital plans at the September meeting, we can absolutely go into more depth in that. We did, as you noted, we did touch on it in April. But it probably would be a good time for us to do a little deeper dive with the board on where we're at in terms of our maintenance and repair. Because I think it is important. We have to balance the need for new state-of-the-art facilities with also maintaining the facility footprint we currently have.
Well, I think we've made more progress than we probably appreciate, and probably the public and certainly maybe the legislature. So I would love to see us talk about that more in September.
Sure.
Any other questions that members may have? One quick clarification, Ryan. Assuming we're asking for $186 million, however, doesn't the state give you an idea of the number they're looking for you to submit when they actually comes around to it?
They do. And
They give you a target?
Yeah, and we haven't gotten that number yet. The one thing I should have noted with all of these projects, we do have the ability to scale those up or down, right, depending on what might be available.
That was the point I was trying to make, is that you will adjust this based upon the target number that comes out of state legislature and governor's
Correct.
office.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. May I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve that President Choi be authorized to submit to the Appropriations State Office of the University of Missouri's fiscal year 2024 state capital appropriations requests as outlined in the materials before you?
So moved.
Second. Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board that President Choi be authorized to submit to the appropriate state offices the University of Missouri's fiscal year 2024 state capital appropriations requests as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Holbrook.
Thank you, Chairman Chapman. Now we have a series of construction progress to approve. So we'll start with Lotus Health Science Library renovation for consolidation at MU.
Thank you, Curator Holbrook. This is contained in your materials. It was included in the April capital plan. And these first two projects are really a result of bringing the Women's and Children's Hospital on to the main campus. It's an $8.5 million project. It will provide physician offices for the Department of Child Health and convert part of the current library into physician offices. It's approximately 35,000 to 40,000 gross square feet of existing space on 3 different floors. We are working closely with Advancement and others on making sure we're respectful of the library was named for the Lottis family and making sure we're communicating with them and they're aware of our plans. The other thing is we would deliver this construction project design bid build, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding this project.
Are there any questions? Hearing none. May I have a motion from the committee to approve the project approval for the Lotus Health Science Library's renovation from consolidation of the University of Missouri Columbia campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting?
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. All right, I got to find out where I'm at here again. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board the project approval of Lotus Health Science Library renovation for consolidation on the University of Missouri Columbia campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Holbrook.
Thank you, Curator Chapman. Project approval for Pershing Commons renovation of Student Health Center and School of Medicine, MU Healthcare offices at MU.
Thank you, Curator Holbrook. This is a $10.9 million project. It was included in the capital plans. Again, it is related to bringing the Women's and Children's campus onto our main campus. This would include moving student health out of the current UPM, the medical building it's in, into Pershing and renovating that, and then also providing some additional physician office space. This project will be delivered, design, bid, build, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have regarding it.
Are there any questions from the committee members of the board?
I just would offer that I'm excited you're doing this. Great.
I'm excited we're doing it, design, bid, build, too.
Yeah, I'll go with the project, you go with the process.
Molly, Mo, did you hear that? Yeah, design, bid, build. Any questions, any other questions? Hearing none. May I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve the project approval of Pershing Commons renovation Student Health Center, School of Medicine, MU Healthcare offices on the University of Missouri campus as outlined in the materials?
So moved. Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board the project approval of the Pershing Commons renovation Student Health Center and School of Medicine, MU Healthcare offices on the University of Missouri Columbia campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Holbrook.
Thank you, Chairman Chapman. Project approval of MU Research Reactor MUR West additions at MU. Ryan.
Thank you, Curator Holbrook. This, along with the next project, they were both included in the April capital plans, but I also am excited to say they're also both part of the state ARPA funding that we plan to receive along with then the federal appropriation. So it's related to the next-gen health, radiopharmaceutical, and animal science projects that the President talked about. For MUR West, this will provide additional capacity for the work they've been doing. I think that we'll have additional research space on several of the floors along with additional production capacity as we move forward with this building, and then they'll have a couple of additional hot cells in this building as well. So I think it's exciting to see this move forward. I know there's been a lot of work on everyone's part to get us to this point, but I'm happy to answer any questions regarding this project.
Are there any questions? I understand some curators toured the facility yesterday. Any comments or questions from them?
I think we were all, wow, that place is amazing. I mean, just the research they're doing, the reactor, and they definitely need this space, and I'm very excited that we're moving forward with this.
They operate this nuclear reactor 6.5 days a week. They're only down for 12 hours for maintenance, and they go back in. It's the only reactor on a university level that has that kind of schedule, and it's important for our customers, which are the medical providers, and it's for cancer isotopes and various things that only that the University of Missouri Research Reactor can produce. It's an amazing facility, and there were a bunch of groundhogs there where this building's getting ready to go. They were they were quite happy to be where they were. But it's, I think this addition is going to be 44,000 square feet.
Correct.
Of building that they need, and they're going to be put to use right away.
I think this is a good time to point out, I know that the last time I toured the facility, they talked about a reactor that had gone down for a period of time. I think it was in Australia. And the University of Missouri at Columbia was the only reactor in the world that could produce the radioisotopes necessary to treat some of the cancers in the lives that were saved simply as a result of the work done here on this campus. And I think the reason I bring this up is I'm not sure very many people understand what they do down there and the impact it has every day on saving lives across the world. And I congratulate them.
Well, and Greg, I would add from a research perspective and just a pure academic inquiry perspective, we are in the lead lab in the entire world with this reactor, and I think that we need to commit to it and continue to stay at the front of the pack.
That's a great point, Curator Graves, which was going to lead me into, I know that we're going to have coming forward a request to commit $100 million for the begin design of a new reactor 20 years from today or 10 years from today on an estimated bill of $800 million is coming down the pike. So it's an issue we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to find partners to deal with that. So it's a hugely important step for the university and the world.
Yeah, and to the extent it matters to those partners, I think they can take from our comments today that the board is firmly behind this idea.
I would agree with what could be taken from that comment. Anybody else? Anybody else want to jump in here? Hearing none. May I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve the project approval of the MU Research Reactor West Edition on the University of Missouri campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting?
So moved. Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board project approval of MU Research Reactor West Edition on the University of Missouri Columbia campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Holbrook.
Thank you, Chairman Chapman. Project approval for next-gen precision health fourth floor fit-out, Mizzou, at MU.
Yeah, thank you, Curator Holbrook. This, when we designed Next Gen, we shelled out space in the fourth floor with the hope that the funding would show up, that we could go ahead and do that. And then with all the excitement with the Mizzou Forward hires, we are in need to move forward with building out the fourth floor fit out. One thing I do want to note is it's noted in the action that it would be funded by state appropriations. This actually would be part of the ARPA program, but we would use the federal support that we're receiving from Senator Blunt to pay for this. So it would be a combination of state and federal appropriations. Any questions?
And I'm assuming this will be design, bid, build?
Yes, that
Thank
is
you.
correct.
What do we project the original timeline for that, to finish the fourth floor? I don't know if that's a question for you or Dr. Barron.
Fall of '24.
So, I mean, this is so exciting. We're way ahead of schedule with your all's recruitment. So kudos to our whisperer, our employee, our hiring whisperer, Rick Barron.
Any other questions?
Well, just not to beat the point to death, but just like the reactor in 1952 when they built it, they didn't know what that was going to be used for. And today, pure science turns into practical applications. That's what Next Gen is. We don't know what we're going to discover there, and I think as a university, we can be proud that we produce research for our citizens and for the rest of the world.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. May I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve the project approval of the Next Gen Precision Health fourth floor fit-out on the University of Missouri Columbia campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board that project approval for the Next-Gen Precision Health fourth floor fit-out for the University of Missouri-Columbia campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Holbrook.
Thank you, Chairman Chapman. This is our final action item. Approval of the Welcome Center at Missouri S&T.
Thank you, Curator Holbrook. This was covered not only in the capital plans, but in the master plan that Chancellor Degani went over earlier this year. The total project's approximately $25.7 million. We would plan to be complete in December of '24 with the project. It would really serve as the new front door to the S&T campus that you've seen, and it will be delivered design bid build.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Thank you, Mo. Any questions on the project? Hearing, well, may I have a motion from the committee? Let me find where I'm at. Can I have a motion from the committee to approve the Missouri Welcome Center at Missouri S&T?
I'll move. This is going to be a real game changer for Missouri S&T. I'll second that.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, we move to recommend to the full board that the project approval of the Welcome Center for Missouri University Science and Technology campus as outlined in the materials for this meeting be approved.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. All right, will that close out your meeting?
Mr. Chairman, this concludes the business of the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you, Curator Holbrook. Curator Williams, I now turn it over to you for the Governance, Compensation, and Human Resources Committee meeting.
Thank you, Chair Chapman. And Chair Chapman, I think Curator Burnsick is joining now for this committee meeting.
Okay.
Closer.
Sorry, my voice usually carries. Good morning. The Governance, Compensation, and Human Resources Committee has one informational item and one action item today. For our first item, an update and further details related to the proposed staff leave design are included in the board materials for your review. Vice President Marcia Fisher, with our partners from AON, will highlight the areas of design and be available for any questions. Marcia?
Thank you, Curator Williams. I am excited for this presentation today. We've been in front of the board a number of times talking about our modernization of our staff leave policy. Today, we're excited to share some additional details with you. As Curator Williams said, we have our good partners in this work, AON, here with us. They'll bring to us their expertise in helping present the materials as well as answer questions. Before we jump into the materials, I'll invite John to the podium and tell us a little bit about himself and AON and his partner, G.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you to the board for having us and allowing us to partner with the university on this important project. My name is John Hamburg. I am an actuary by background. I've been with the firm approximately 25 years now. And with me is G. Leong. He is an associate partner at our firm. And the two of us, you can think of him as a younger, smarter, thinner version of me with a few less gray hairs. But we spend the majority of our time working with large, complex organizations around their strategy and design of rewards programs. and in particular focusing on employee benefits. And so Aon as an organization, in case for those that don't know, we are a global firm of about 50,000 employees. We specialize in two main areas of business. There is a risk management and brokerage side of the business, and there is a human capital solutions consulting line of business. We sit within that human capital consulting line of business. And so as I mentioned, we spend the majority of our time working with organizations on their reward strategy. And our job in this process is to bring together our subject matter expertise, our knowledge, our benchmarking data, our analytical abilities, and to marry that together with the university's goals, objectives, guiding principles to ultimately navigate and land on a solution. And I think we'll see that coming up, that will bring the leave programs to a better state going forward. So with that, I'll turn it back to Marcia to introduce a few concepts.
We certainly appreciate our partnership with Aon in a number of ways. We often use them for actuarial services, benchmarking, kind of that broader perspective. So let's see if I might just ask you to advance it for me. Thank you. I'll start off by just grounding us, and many of these slides you've seen previously, so we'll go through them quickly, but just this is the journey we've been on so far. We've given a couple of updates to the board of the general design principles. We've worked with a variety of constituent groups, and we'll make further efforts with them. And today we come with some more details. Next slide. You've seen these many times. There are guiding principles and really our North Star on this project. And I'll just highlight a few quickly. We do want to modernize our leave programs because we want to be able to effectively recruit and retain employees. We know this is a very valued benefit, and we want to get it right. We also know that it is an investment by the university, so that we want it to be an effective program, one that incentivizes and rewards the right behavior. We do want to realize cost savings and design a leave program that promotes work-life balance. And part of the project, we did explore differentiating staff type and industry. A slide that reminds us the importance of leaves with our employees and encourages work-life balance. It's a desired benefit in the market, supports productivity and optimal performance, and again, it facilitates retention and reduces turnover. And again, it's something that's valued by employees, and it's an investment by the university, so we want to really explore how do we make it effective, how do we reward and really the appropriate behavior, and how it supports the mission of the university. Finally, before I turn it over to G to go into some more detail with his subject matter expertise, just reminding us what a complex organization the University of Missouri is. No job family has more than 10% of the workplace. You can see that there's a number of different departments and job titles. And I will highlight too, we're watching the turnover rate at that expert level, individual contributor to mid-level management. So that was also informing us as we were thinking about how to design this effectively program. So G, if I can invite you up to continue on with that.
Marcia, one quick question before you step away. How many employees does the university have in total, roughly?
Well, in total, roughly 30,000, but that includes part-time students, faculty. And it's important to recognize that the leave design that we're talking about today is for staff only.
So
and benefit eligible.
Let me re-ask the question. How many employees are affected by this leave program? That's probably a better way to ask that.
Yeah, I was going to say 12, but my expert tells me about 13,000.
13,000, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Marcia, I've got a question.
Yes.
What does that fourth bullet point mean? I'm trying to understand what that means.
So it means when we're looking at our data, turnover rate currently and right now, it's where are we seeing some turnover? And so at that expert level, individual contributor or mid-level management. So maybe an expert in finance, maybe what we would refer to commonly as a CPA. Those are the kind of the level of professionals that I just want to keep an eye on movement in that space.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marcia. Well, piggybacking on like just the complex organization, the good news is you're not the only organization that's complex. In fact, a lot of large organizations are equally as complex. You're gonna have employees where you're hiring, maybe from other universities, but also from just broad general industry. And a lot of large universities are in the same camp where they're gonna have people that are more in the academic field and some others otherwise. Right? So one of the guiding principles is, market competitive, and this is challenging because we need to define who the market is. Right? And sometimes, when we look at the market, we want to see where can we hire this employee? Could be at other universities, could be at somewhere else. And when we benchmark things like, compensation, for example, we take that very customized approach. We look at each individual job, where can we hire them, and how much is that job worth, and we customize that. Benefits, which is the realm we're in, is a little bit different. Benefits is oftentimes a one-size-fits-all approach. Everybody gets the same benefits, and regardless of what type of employee you are, right? So when organizations benchmark benefits, oftentimes they look for other organizations that look and feel like them, oftentimes in a similar industry. So we'll look at some benchmark data later on, but we're really focused on other large public institutions like you, but we also recognize that you are also hiring from broad general industry, so we'll give you that broader national general industry perspective too. So I just wanted to give everybody kind of just set the stage a little bit on how we think of the market when it comes to benefits. So this page here provides just a broad overview of the types of time off programs. Right? The first gray boxes here it's the traditional approach. It's where a lot of organizations came from, and this is where you're at. It's providing different buckets of time off for different purposes. There's vacation time for you to go to the Bahamas, sick days, if you're falling sick, personal days, you want to go to a soccer game. Different time off for different purposes, and there are holidays, okay? More and more organizations are changing that mindset and moving to the yellow boxes, a more general PTO or paid time off bank, where essentially they're combining the vacation and the sick days and personal days. Employers are agnostic of how people want to use their time. If you want to use the time to recover, if you want to take a mental health day, if you want to go on a vacation, that is your time. We don't want to have to manage how you use your time, right? A lot of organizations like that empowerment. A lot of organizations also like the fact that it promotes better scheduling, lesser surprises on absences. Right? People are using those time appropriately. But organizations that move to that bank, they oftentimes separate holidays. Right? Holidays are fixed days, shut off on July 4th, for example. That's a fixed day. Organizations keep those days separate. So as one of our proposals for campus, this is the type of more modernized structure that we're thinking about, that we're proposing. Now, the last set of boxes there, that's the expanded paid time off bank. Very common only in certain industries, and healthcare or hospitals, that's in particular the most common one, where essentially the holidays are also included in that bank. Because think of the nature of that business, right? It's 24/7. Hospital can't say it's Christmas Day, we're going to shut off. They can't say that, right? So for hospitals, oftentimes, most of the hospitals are going to say, here is just a number of days, you can use it whenever you see fit. And that's the proposal that we're going to propose for your hospital staff, your MU Healthcare. Okay, next slide. This is a quick reminder of where we're at today. These are your leave plans. So at the top, vacation, you'll see that exempt and non-exempt have different number of days. Oh, sorry, Curator Holloway.
I have a question. You defined the staff as 13,000, right?
Yep.
We clarified that from the 30,000 total. And so, but we also have this exempt and non-exempt. What are the numbers inside the 13,000 for the exempt and non-exempt?
Yeah, exempt is going to be about close to 5,000, non-exempt 8,000. And a lot of your non-exempt staff are on the MU Healthcare side. Okay, and just maybe one clarification that's not on this page here. For nurses, they're technically non-exempt, but they're accruing, they're getting the benefits for the exempt employees.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so you see that for vacation, let's look at non-exempt. They start with 12 days. They get the extra week at year 15. They get the extra week at year 5, and the second bump up at year 15. Towards the bottom, you'll see some of the blue squares there. You also, in addition, you get 4 personal days. You also get winter break, which is very common in the university or higher ed education system, and then 9 holidays. You also, or your staff also receive 12 sick days. Right? And those sick days are meant for different purposes. You're going to have your, what we think of as incidental sick days, your one or 2 days here and there, cold and flu. There are also some more serious illnesses, cancer, accident, right? More on disability type treatments. So your 12 days is meant to cover all that. Okay, that's where you're at today. Different bank of days for different purposes. If you move to the next slide, here is where we want the future to be. So if you see PTO bank, we're combining vacation, personal, and incidental sick, right? I want to clarify, this is only for the sick time where it's, you got a day here, you're not feeling well, another day where you have the flu, that's the incidental sick. And we're keeping the current structure where exempt and non-exempts have separate schedules, separate days. You'll see those days are bigger, more days, because we're combining some of these days together. The other thing that we are also changing is, where do we get the initial bump? Right? It used to be 5 and 15 years of service. Now we're accelerating that to 3 and 10. And this is consistent with where we're seeing the market going. Right? The workforce is a little bit more nimble. People are providing, organizations are providing more time sooner. Towards the far right, we're keeping the holidays and winter breaks exactly the same as where you're at now. Okay? And for the new stuff at the bottom. So now that we have now that we've included all these days in the PTO bank, what if I have to go through cancer treatments, extended illness? What do we do with that? We're putting together a short-term disability plan, and this is very common in general industry. Very common. It's basically income continuation for the amount of time you're out until you're recovered and ready to come back to work, regardless of how long you've been with the organization. And more organizations like this kind of safety net because it provides a more equitable safety net to everybody. Right? Currently, for organizations that have big sick bank accruals like you, the longer employees are there and the more they manage the time, they bank up a lot of time, they have a bigger safety net. But that might not be true for someone who is maybe a little newer or who have not banked up enough time. Right? So that's short-term disability plan essentially. And then there's parental leave. Right? Parental leave is one of the hottest, most exciting benefit areas within the last 7 to 8 years. Right? And this is parental leave for both the mom and dad. The point of this parental leave is for bonding, for a new parent to bond with the child. Right? So as I think about one of the most highly perceived, highly valued benefits relative to the cost, this is one benefit area that a lot of organizations are excited about. Right? But it's also important to consider, well, parental leave, it's really benefiting your 25 to 35-year-olds. What about the 45 and the 55-year-olds? Right? So they might not be, having more children, but they might have other needs too. There might be a sick parent. There might be a sick spouse. There might be a sick child. Right? So we're expanding that parental leave concept and also considering caregiver leave so that we're going to be treating, different generational cohorts more equally. It's a more inclusive plan feature. Okay? So I think about the yellow boxes as kind of broader leave, PTO bank, everybody takes it every year, holidays, broad. I think about the bottom, the short-term disability, parental caregiver leave as more narrow, but it's providing specific time off for moments that matter. Right? Employers want to be there for employees for the moments that matter. Yes.
Question, is the parental caregiver leave paid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I've probably been through this presentation 2 times before. I've never heard of the parental caregiver leave component.
It's the part we talked about that it often tracks FMLA, or we haven't gotten to that design level, but that it would be up to 4 weeks for those qualifying events.
Yeah, and I don't think we've had a discussion about the qualifying events. Is that something we're going to do today or not?
We haven't had a detailed discussion on the qualifying events. It's pretty common for it to track FMLA, which narrows the scope of when it's used.
Is that something we're going to do today?
Hey, Todd, no. This is kind of giving everybody an overview so we can talk about what are we comfortable moving forward with so that we can give them the direction to then actually craft the plan. So if we decide, yes, we want to consider the parent caregiver leave as part of this, then they would come up with the language and words that we would use to have that in our plan. Right now, we're just trying to get the information out so we can talk about what parts of this we like, what parts of this we want to change.
Okay. Thank you. All right, next slide, please. All right, here's the recommendation for MU Healthcare. So one of our guiding principles is, let's evaluate, because the businesses are just so different between campus and MU Healthcare, does it make sense to have the exact same structure, or does it make sense to change a little bit? And for MU Healthcare, we want to be consistent with other large hospitals, so we are proposing that we'll include the holidays into the PTO bank, but other than that, like the accelerating the extra week from 5 to 3 years, or 15 to 10 years, that's very similar to campus, the short-term disability, parental leave, that's all very similar. We're still working through with the team on the number of days, so that's TBD, but that structure is quite consistent. The only difference is sweeping and holidays. Okay? Next slide, please. All right, this is a page with a lot of numbers, and this is basically trying to illustrate what the market is providing. And when we do benchmarking, we really analyze a lot more things than that. We want to analyze not only the number of days, but we also want to know, how are those days earned? How are those days paid out? When do we get the extra week? How fast the schedule ramps up? Not going to bore you with all that today. We just want to give you a pretty high-level view, so we're focused on the total number of days in year one. At the first year, total number of days. So for the proposal for campus on the far right, you'll see that that's the hourly for non-exempt. What's the total number of days? That's the 18 days from the PTO, 9 days for holidays, and 4 days for winter break. That's how we get to the 31. On the left side of the page, let's focus on the second row there. That's going to be 2022 data. The first row, that's 2020. So it's a little bit data. We just wanted to show how things have changed over the last couple of years. And let's focus on the first two numbers, the 34 and the 31. Right, those are sort of the total number of days for the SEC universities as well as the AAU public. Okay? And for those who have PTO banks, the calculation is similar. Let's add in the holidays, let's add in the winter break, let's add in the personal days, and let's add in the PTO days. For those who have vacation and sick bank, that calculation is for the most part similar in the sense that we add in the holidays, we add in the personal days, we add in the vacation days. But for sick, we're not adding the entire bank. Right? The point of sick days is not meant for people to use the whole bank. There will be some people that will use a lot of it, but most people are going to use a couple of days here and there. So when we want to compare apples to apples, for sick days, we don't add the full bank. We want to add in the days that people are expected to use. And we typically use an assumption of 3, 4, or 5 days. When we looked at your staff population, that average utilization is about 4 sick days. So we added for the universities that have separate sick bank, we add 4 days to the total number of days. Okay, a lot of math. Yep.
So to clarify that, because we've been through this quite a few times, we have offered them 12 sick days in the past few. That's been the standard that they've offered.
Yep.
But the average usage of 6 days,
4 days.
is 4 days.
Yep.
So they had 12 available.
Yep.
And they only used 4.
On average, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because some
I think
people
that's-
that,
I think that's a key point here. If we're talking about reducing some days or how we're going to change the days and change these benefits, that although the days were available, our workforce only used 4.
correct.
Expanding on that just for a moment if I could, but I also understand any unused sick days accumulate, which they could take with a longer illness later in life. But if they are healthy and they get to retirement days, the number of sick days are counted toward years of service?
Correct. It's counted, well, clarify that. For those who are eligible for the defined benefit plan, the pension plan, yes, those those sick days will be counted
That is
towards
years of service.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
But those days are not paid out. It's different from vacation. Vacation days are paid out, sick days are not. And for those who are not in the defined benefit plan, those sick days don't impact their retirement income.
Yeah, but it does count on years of service, so they can either retire earlier, a year earlier possibly if they've accumulated enough, and those sorts of things. So there is an economic impact to the university on the defined benefit plan because we have to stand the payments of those. We have to make good on those payments. So in essence, they are taking them other than at the end of their career.
It's included it's included in the pension calculation, that's right.
But when we look at the bank, the point of the bank was to get people through different life stages, right? I mean, whether it's the young people, it's the caregiver. I mean, I see and I have some similar questions on some of the other programs that are outside the bank. But as a whole, the bank is intended to get people through their life as an employee with us.
That's right.
Through the different things that we know will happen while they work with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we hope, I think of it this way, like it's meant to cover both incidental illness, which everybody's going to have some, right? We'll need some time to know that's going to be we're going to fall sick. But it's the scary part is the extended stuff. That's the stuff that nobody wants to have to ever use, right? And yes, for those staff that have been in the university for a long time, they have a good amount of bank of days for safety net, which they might use or they might never ever have to use. But what about the lens that we're thinking about too is what about, that 25-year-old new mom that's having a child, she might not have enough days saved up yet. Where the short-term disability is agnostic on the years of service, everybody gets the same amount of salary continuation as long as they need.
So, clarification here, please help me out. I know I shouldn't be doing this at this stage. But a new mom could use a short-term disability for the time she misses, because of, I guess it's considered a disability from that standpoint, or is a birth not considered a disability?
It's, and I know this is public session.
I'm trying to understand.
I don't like,
this.
I personally don't like the term disability.
Okay.
But yes, it's covered as part of
Okay,
the.
so a new mom-
It's a medical event.
Okay, a new mom then would get, if we have the short-term health program, let's call it that.
Yeah.
Would get that benefit, and then on top of that, if we had the parental leave, they could take additional time for the bonding?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay, so if we had this program in place, how many days can a new mom have upon the birth of a child?
So
Or father.
usually,
Or
Well, the
Didn't-
father won't
didn't-
get the health side of it.
Okay.
yeah. So,
Right.
so
The parental leave.
for birth parent, they will get short-term disability. It's usually 6 weeks for natural birth.
Both parents get it for?
No, only
Okay.
the birth parent, because
Okay.
that's part of the medical event.
Yeah, okay, so that's 6 weeks.
That's 6 weeks.
Okay,
And then after that, it's the bonding part. That's the parental
Right.
leave. It'll be 4 weeks to bond.
so they get 10 weeks of paid time off.
Correct. And then non-birth parent, whether it's the dad or if an adoption event, they'll get 4 weeks to bond. Right, and this is the EEOC guideline where, from the perspective of bonding leave, you cannot discriminate between, the gender or whether it's the birth parent or not. Okay? All right, so getting back to the numbers, you'll see that 34 for SEC, 31 for AAUP, those numbers were more like 29 a couple of years ago. Oh, sorry, can we go back to the prior page? Yep. And you'll see that your 31 days for hourly employees or non-exempt employees is well calibrated there. But we also wanted to give everybody some perspective of what if we look at national, broad, general industry, and we looked at our entire database. We have about 1,000 organizations in our database. You're going to have organizations all across the country in a variety of industries. We'll see that those similar calculations yield a total days of 28 days. So a little bit less than a university, but either way, your 31 days is well calibrated with other universities, not also rather well aligned with general industry. And just to maybe round it out, the couple of rows at the bottom there, you see those numbers are a little bit bigger. It's really wanting to be transparent, and instead of adding just 4 days for sick banks, we're adding the full sick bank. I think it's apples to oranges. It's an apples to oranges comparison because people are not meant to use all those days, but for the sake of just illustrating, you'll see that the universities have usually bigger sick banks. Those numbers, that 31 for AAU public, that goes to 39, whereas for general industry, a large sick bank is not very common. That 28 just goes to 30. Okay? And the last column there, instead of averages, we just wanted to look at median. Because we're looking at a large sample size, the averages and the median are not very different. Now I'm starting to sound like an actuary. Okay, on the right side of the page, maybe just 30 more seconds on this page here, we wanted to make sure that local Missouri is not too different from national. We wanted to have that local perspective, and we pulled some data there, and no surprise, you'll see that it's very consistent, whether we look at things through a local lens or whether we look at things through a national lens. Okay? All right, next page. Here it's a little
Question, please. Many of these staffers are also in a pension. Do we know, Marcia, do you have that number? How many of the 13,000 are in the pension plan?
They're all in some kind of pension plan.
Yeah, you're asking about the difference between the defined benefit, the members still in the having the defined benefit, the old plan, as opposed to our new 401K?
I'm just saying we have, I would assume, a large amount of that 13,000 in a plan, which is extremely generous. And so when we're comparing versus private industry, I think there is another level of benefits they receive here.
Yeah, when you're looking at like the total package, is this what you're referring to? Yes, yes, your pension plan is valuable. Yes, that's right.
I'd just add, I don't have the exact numbers. I know we went over that in March. The one thing that we should keep in mind is I think it's within 5 years, the majority of our staff will be in the new DC plan, just with the amount of turnover we have. So while we still have a fair number of staff in the pension plan, that is going to move on pretty quickly.
And if we're going to talk about that, my question is, on the accrual that we're changing, that is being proposed to change, will the employees in the old pension, the defined benefit plan, okay, will their accrual rules change or not? Are their accruals baked into the defined benefit plan?
I think I know what you're asking. Do you mean sick leave that goes to service credit? Would that change?
Yeah, those sick days that are able to accrue in the defined benefit plans. Now, as we change the accrual on this, your proposal, will that change for the defined benefit accrual portion?
So we would propose that all employees move to the new plan, but if someone has accrued sick leave, that won't be taken away. And if they separated at the time of separation, if they retired, those accrued sick days would still go towards that service credit.
You're going to ask the defined benefit folks to change, but they may or may not. Is that
Well,
what you
the proposal is that they would move into the new design of leave so that all staff would be in the new design, but accrued sick leave wouldn't be taken away that they accrued in the previous plan.
That's what I ask. I ask if their accrual benefits abilities would change. If they decide to stay in the defined benefit plan and stay in the old plan, they have that option. Is that correct?
Yes, this will not impact the retirement plans.
So Keith, if I understand your question, if somebody has they're in the defined benefit plan, they have 300 days of sick leave. I don't know, I'm just making up a number.
Accrued.
Accrued. If we switch to the new plan, or when we switch, it's kind of like a dividing line, and they keep their 300 unless something else happens, but they don't accrue more on this side.
That's what I'm asking.
That's
Yes.
absolutely right. That's the plan.
So it would be like a bright line day.
So we could, so that stands still, their accrual in the defined benefit plan, and those employees that are still participating in that, their accrual days will be locked in at that particular time.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And then to expand on that just for a moment, I would assume then if they have accrued in Curator Williams 300 days, that if they became sick prior to retirement, on top of the other PTO they would get, they could take those 300 days?
So those are some details that we're still working through. We do intend to have a smooth transition for current employees into the new design. And so some of those decision points around accrued vacation and accrued sick leave. And it's kind of purposeful because there's pros and cons and trade-offs, and it's our chance to go talk to staff and get their feedback. So for example, on accrued vacation, not sick, a strategy could be to pay out that accrued time at a point in time. It could be at separation. It could be the option to use some of it. So some of those details are still to be worked out. But I do think it's important, and I think you're both emphasizing it, those accrued days won't simply be taken from a current employee, which is one of the number one questions I often hear.
All right, let's go to the next page. Let's round out kind of the benchmarking. We focused a lot on the non-exempt. And if you look at the table at the left, those are the non-exempt numbers. At the bottom row, you'll see the average total days, 34 days for SEC, 31 days for AAU Public, and 31 days for the UN proposal. But we also want to make sure that, okay, is the mix of 31 days, whether it's PTO holiday, is that still consistent with the market? Is that aligned? And you'll see that, 13 holidays plus winter break, right? We think of that as fixed days. You can only use it on the day itself. That's fairly consistent with the industry or the other universities. And the PTO days, that's fairly consistent too. On the right side of the page, similar numbers, but for exempt staff, right? A lot of industries have, exempt and non-exempt. There's no differentiation with leave, but for universities, it's common to have separate plans for exempt and non-exempts. So, and you're seeing that here too, right? For AAU public, you see the 31 days goes to 36, exams get 1 extra week. SEC universities, that differentiation is less big, 34 to 37, okay? So maybe the one takeaway here is like the design is very intentional to be well aligned with the market, other large universities. Okay, some considerations. Why are we doing some of this? And we talked a little bit about this earlier. Like PTO plans tend to have a higher perceived value, right? People are not, it's transparent. These are the number of days that I can use. I don't have to worry about, do I use it for this purpose or that purpose? These are the number of days that you can use. And it's very empowering. The employer is saying, we don't want to have to micromanage how you use those time off. It's for you. We want you to use. We want you to, it's your time, right? It's easier to understand. And when it's highly perceived and easier to understand and transparent, that's going to improve our ability to recruit and retain talent, right? Then the next bullet there, the next large bullet, parental leave, caregiver leave, as I talked about earlier, these are programs that are very valued, highly perceived by employees, rather leading edge, but relatively low cost, right? Because not everybody is going to take parental leave every year. Very few people are going to take those, or fairly low cost. And short-term disability, that is starting to become like the industry standard. Most organizations have a short-term disability plan, okay? And then the bright yellow there, the next phase, Marsha kind of alluded to this. One of the most important things as through this project is we need to consider, the transition program or transition plan for current employees. Let's move to the next slide. So what are we doing for current employees? We're moving, as Marsha said, we're moving all current employees to the new program because we think it's a positive, right? We think that the PTO plans, people are gonna enjoy that flexibility. I think the accountability is good. And more importantly, I think as a university, we want to be consistent. We don't want two people sitting next to each other and both of them have, different programs just because one was hired a couple months later, right? And that's fairly consistent more broadly too. When organizations make changes like this, it's usually applied across the board. On the right side of right column there, we do want to acknowledge that this might be, or this will be challenging. Some employees will be really excited about parental leave and short-term disability and PTO, but there will be employees that are more apprehensive over it, right? There might be a perceived value that, hey, the sick bank is very valuable. I got a lot of days now. And these programs, short-term disability, that's new. I don't understand it. And when people don't understand something, people are afraid, right? So I do want to acknowledge that this will be a challenge, and therefore we want to take our time and really think through a transition plan. And through the transition plan, it's really two broad things. One is the design itself. How do we allow people to keep the days that they have earned? What do we do with those days? There's the design component of it, and then there is the communication and change management component of it too. We want to make sure that people understand what they have and recognize that everybody is going to have their own individual circumstance, even though like the numbers are the same. Everybody gets the same leave. Each person's individual circumstance is going to be different. So we're going to take time to make sure that people understand the benefit. Okay, I'll turn it back to Marsha.
So I wanted to talk a few minutes about the communication strategy. And between now and bringing this back to the board in September, we do intend to go to offer educational sessions for employees, going to our constituent groups, getting feedback to the extent there may be some decisions that feedback can inform. We'll get that information. There's a dedicated webpage that's live now that has information for employees, including frequently asked questions. We're creating some key messaging so that we can help leaders be able to explain this. And also a big component will be training leaders and managers on how to effectively operationalize a new leave plan. So we know that that's part of the long-term strategy in making this transition. So next steps is doing that work July and August before coming back to the board in September. Another thing I'd like to highlight, if there's current employees listening, the implementation would be January of 2024. And that sounds like a long ways off, but there's a lot of work in between now and then. RFPs and changing technology systems, educating leaders and things like that. So this is something that we can be thoughtful with and work our way through. I'll turn it over to John to kind of tie it up before we open it up for more questions.
Yeah, on the last slide about delivering the guiding principles, I don't think we want to rehash what we just talked about in detail, but when you think about, the initial 5 guiding principles that were set out about making the program more market competitive, we've seen how that aligns with the number of days across the different universities and industry segments. Improving the effectiveness, that the PTO program by nature encourages better use of, scheduled time, better planning, reduces the potential for abuse of sick time. Throughout this process, with some of the improved productivity that'll come with this, and the better planning and the avoidance of unscheduled absence, there'll be cost savings along the way. This is also going to further promote work-life balance, getting people to be empowered and use that time, schedule it, use it, and also, as G pointed out, to be there for those moments that matter. The things like the parental leave. That's an important life event where new parents are seeking that additional time to bond with their child. The caregiver leave, the ability for especially the sort of sandwich generation, if you read about that, folks that are often in their 40s to 50s that are both navigating current family situations as well as aging parents, providing a structure and a framework for them to be able to provide that support is very important. And then finally, to circle back and say that, the program is calibrated and has some differentiation across exempt and non-exempt. And additionally, recognizing that the healthcare system, just the nature of that operation, 365 days a year, the concept of a fixed holiday is just a bit different in that environment. So having a similar backbone to the structure in the program, but yet sweeping into those holidays into the PTO bank, just because of the difference in the nature of the organization makes sense. So the proposal takes into account some of that needed differentiation. So we think at the end of the day here that this proposed program lines up fairly well with the objectives and the guiding principles. We hope that the board agrees, but maybe we'll open it up to questions unless we've got any other comments.
I want to ask an equity question here. I understand the concept of healthcare that's 365 days a week, 24 hours a day, and you can't have fixed holidays. I got that. Makes sense. Here's what I don't understand. Why in total days of paid time away from work, call it what you want, but being paid not to show up, should a healthcare worker get less than a custodian?
What's that?
Yeah, I think at this point with healthcare, we're working with leaders and working through what that number would be. I think you're probably referring to that benchmarking data
Yeah,
that
was
showed
like
the
big difference.
industry, and G, you might want to talk about that.
Yeah, the healthcare industry, just in general, tends not to have as much paid time off. Higher education tends to be an industry that has more paid time off. We do see some differentiation across different industries, and so when you're thinking about calibrating, part of that differentiation in looking at the quote-unquote market is to say, if you've got a hospital system within a university context, do you align those programs to a university setting, or do you align it to a healthcare setting? Because realistically, that employee population of nurses, doctors, staff, physicians, et cetera, the competitive employment opportunity is more realistically another healthcare system than it is another university, unless it's a university that has a healthcare system. So generally speaking, the healthcare system is going to align to the industry, meaning healthcare as opposed to higher ed.
I understand that. That makes complete sense. And then let's just expand that whole concept just a little bit. I'm not competing I will tell you for our upper-level staff, for the president of our university, Marcia, Ryan, and Dr. Barron, and we're competing as AAU universities, we're competing at SEC universities to offer them programs that are that are comparable, because they can go and will go. I don't believe we're competing with SAC and AAU for our administrative assistants, our janitors, our mid-level managers. We're not competing with them with other colleges and/or universities, except for maybe Columbia College here locally and Stevens College, and isn't there another one in town? I don't know.
Oh, but Moberly, you could, I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
about higher ed perhaps.
So my point is, and the point I'm trying to make is I feel like you're asking me to talk out of both sides of my mouth here at the same time, saying that if you are a university employee paid by the same authority, which is the Board of Curators, and you're a hospital worker paid by the Board of Curators, a hospital healthcare worker is entitled to less time off. I have an equity problem with that. Maybe I'm the only one with an equity problem with that.
It's an excellent point, and that will be part of that discussion, is to say if you were operating a standalone hospital system that had nothing to do with the university, take up a private healthcare system where they're not complicated by that additional comparison point of being situated within the university environment, that's probably an easier comparison point and decision for them to make, because they only have to align with the industry. This will be a discussion point, and why that was still TBD in the materials is to say, as you're considering what the healthcare part of the university should get, is there an element of equity to say, even if the healthcare industry at large is maybe a little less generous, a few days less generous, do we still want to create that potential inequity within the system, having people side by side under, on the same campus effectively, with the differential in benefits? You may not want to do that. That is an excellent consideration.
But take that a different way. How many, and you gave us some general industry number and locally, how many of those are hospitals? I'm going to make an assumption. I know what happens when I assume things, so I'm going to ask the question. I'll ask it directly. Compare the paid time off for the medical staff at Boone Hospital and MUHC. Is it very similar?
I don't know the.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer that question. So right now, your hospital employees have the exact same program as campus with one differential, no winter break days.
Right.
So
4 days less.
4 days less, and your current program is provide more days compared to like the
Yeah, okay, so
hospital. And
is Boone Hospital is Boone Hospital's paid time off very similar to our hospital or very similar to our campus?
It's in that last column. It says 27.
27.
Okay. Here's my point. Where's that number? I find it hard I'd say hard to believe. I question the fact that we're not incorporating, we give us general industry, but I suspect that the medical profession of the central Missouri, which is probably some of the largest employers, you take St. Mary's, you take Capital Regional, you take Boone Hospital, huge employers, I would suspect that their paid time off is closer to 27 than the general industry you gave me of 30.
that's
And I just,
Healthcare has its own column, though.
I understand that, but I'm compared
27.
to employers. If you are an administrative assistant, does it matter whether or not you could leave here and go to work at Boone Hospital, from the university, go to work at Boone Hospital, the talents are the same, the things are the same, you just work in a different industry, and a lot can.
Yep.
And that's.
I mean, every employer I have talked to, now I'm not talking to the real large employers, I don't know them. But I talk to a lot of medium-sized employers like myself and other people that are private employers ourselves. When I talk about 28 days, 30 days, 31 days, or 41 days of paid time off, they think I'm nuts. They look at me and just say, Greg, you're nuts. You have gone off the deep end.
Yeah, so I'll first acknowledge that our database consists of mostly of large employers. We don't have, your smaller private employers in our database. And you might be right that, smaller employers have maybe fewer number of days off, and the administration of it might also be more flexible, right? Someone's out having a baby, all right, take the time off you need. But for a large organization, we can't do that, right? It needs to be driven by policies, and we're benchmarking against other policies in large employers. Now, for general industry, that 28 days, it's really, benefits really vary by industry. You're gonna have like pharmaceuticals, universities, oil and gas, financial services that have, more days. You're gonna have more your retail and manufacturing that have fewer days, right? So acknowledge that, yes, an administrative assistant, to use your example, could go work at another employer with fewer days, but they can also go work at a State Farm and get more days too.
That is, I wholeheartedly agree with that statement.
Yep. But the key with benefits is, it's not as customizable as compensation, where we could say, okay, your job is X, and we'll hire you, you could go to another company and work for the same position, hence we'll calibrate your pay to that job. That's more on the compensation side. For benefits, it's usually one size fits all. Everybody gets the same retirement plan, everybody gets the same medical plan. For leave, we see some bifurcation between exempts and non-exempts, especially universities is one industry that would have that. But we rarely see, I've never seen different categories or classes of non-exempt, saying, okay, you're category A employee of non-exempt, you get these days, category B that days, and so on. We don't really see that.
I understand that, but we're talking about the total number of days given, and that's, I'm not suggesting that, well, I've suggested all sorts of things, Marcia, you well know that, trying to find a solution to this problem. I'm just questioning the total number of days we're offering.
Well, Greg, let me make sure we're all talking about, not talking apples and oranges. These numbers include holidays.
Yeah.
So if you assume there are 9 holidays and you gave somebody 2 weeks of leave, you're at 14 plus 9, that's 23.
A week is 5 days.
I'm sorry, 5. So
A week is 5
10
days.
plus 9, you're at 19 just to start without, with
Personal
just
days.
vacation and holidays, you're at 23, right? Am I doing the math? No, 19, you're right. So 10 plus 9. So you're at 19 without any sick leave, without anything other than vacation and holidays. And so that's why I'm like, when you're adding these, I want to make sure you're remembering that we're talking about the holidays that we've already agreed to are already in there.
No, I don't. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Curator Williams, is that we've agreed to the 9 holidays, and we give them 4 more holidays on spring break, which, not spring break, winter break. To me, it's the total number of days paid to be away from work, however you want to categorize it. What is that total number of days we're going to pay somebody not to work? And I just find the number high.
I would agree. I completely agree with Curator Hobrock. And I think he's right. We do a lot of comparing to SEC and AAU, but, I think he's spot on with the fact that, for staffers, we're probably not going to lose staffers to, AAU across the country. It's really more local. So when I see the private local and the healthcare local, to me, those are extremely relevant. I do have one question, and, I was a little surprised we would go from 15 years, from 5 and 15 to 3 and 10. Can you talk about that? And I wonder if like Boone, if Boone's 15 or 10 years to get the maximum number.
Yeah,
You may not know
I
that.
don't remember what Boone's schedule is, but the rationale for the 5 and 15 is, one, that's just where a lot of organizations are heading to, because the workforce isn't as nimble. Like, it's, people are generally not working the full career at an organization anymore. So just being able to accelerate that, we think that it would help retention. And 3 years also calibrates well with your defined contribution plan, but that vesting is 3 years. So there's something nice about having the leave program being consistent with the defined contribution plan. That's how we got to 3.
The broader trend with time off, and this goes beyond higher education, just across, all of corporate America, is that organizations are trying to get more time to employees sooner in their career. Gone are the days of people working 10, 20, 30 years and getting that 6th week of vacation after 30 years of employment. You just don't see people reaching those 20 and 30-year milestones like they once did. And so the idea is to move those milestones, much sooner in the careers, or even start people at higher levels of vacation, where, typically people started with 2 weeks of vacation and took 5 years to get that 3rd week. We see a lot of employers moving to just say, let's move to 3 weeks right off the bat. One, that takes some of the negotiation out of people that are, they've been working for 5 or 10 years somewhere else. They already have 3 weeks at that other employer. you're trying to attract them, you get into a negotiation, and so a lot of employers just want to avoid that altogether and establish well, let's just bring everybody in at 3 weeks, avoid that negotiation, and get people, it's an attraction tool, is to get people more time sooner in their careers. President Choi, it looked like you were.
Yes, I have a comment.
I
You
just
wanna go
had,
first?
I just had a comment on the vacation days. You know, where I work, and, you know, many times the not the vacation days, the holidays, you know, we get a little break on the holidays because the mail doesn't run, but we're all there working, okay? We just don't get the mail. Or we might show up to the bank to make a deposit, oh, but the bank's not open. But the 9 vacation days, every vacation day, holiday that's allowed, the university allows them to be off with pay. Well, I don't know where these numbers for the private sector comes. I know a lot of large companies, I guess, get all 9 of the holidays. But out here in the general industry and private industry, just because it's a banking holiday or a federal holiday, the mail's not running, the bank's not open, but we're out there working. So those 9 holidays, to me, that's just generous. I just think it's generous.
And that may fundamentally be a difference between perhaps smaller employers versus, you know, larger organizations and institutions.
And, yes, that's right. To his point, the different job classifications, the different kind of job structures within this very large grouping, the 1,124 different titles and so on and so forth, many of those more mirror the small business and the businesses here in Columbia, okay, that will be vying for these employees. And that's the way they are run. And I think he has a good point in that. It's something that we need to keep in mind.
Maybe one other point or perspective to have in this as well is that I think you're very realistic and right in that certain staff level employees are not going to up and leave and go to the University of Illinois or the University of Iowa or head to the next state over to go to another university to take another job. It's not just real. It's just not realistic, right? People are not going to move for those types of roles. But I think there is an element of expectation to say, I work for a university, therefore the university should be providing a rewards package of comp and benefits, retirement, time off, et cetera, that is comparable to what another university, perhaps in another state or another environment. There's a mindset that a university ought to have a similar level of rewards, regardless of whether it's here in Missouri or another state, which that's what makes it relevant to look at other universities, even if you're saying that may not be a direct competitor for talent. There's an expectation and a mindset. You know, we were talking about this before the meeting, that when we talk with biotech companies, there's a hub in Cambridge, you know, in Boston. There's a lot of biotech and high-tech industry there. There's a lot in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area and San Francisco. They're on opposite sides of the country, but yet those organizations will still look at each other and figure out what they're doing as part of their relevant benchmarking, because there's a mindset and an expectation that within the industry, there's a certain level of benefit, comp, retirement, time off, whatever the case may be. There's an expectation that within the industry, organizations will treat employees similarly, even if they happen to be on opposite sides of the coin.
Great. If I can make a comment. First of all, this is a really good discussion, and I think Marcia and the team from Aon have a lot to think about, to reflect on what was discussed. But I do want to clarify that even with the discussions that we had today, that the staff members of this university and the university system do an incredible job for the university. I want to make that very, very clear, and I believe we all agree on that.
Yes.
Second, the overall goal of looking at the leave program was, how do we design a benefits program with the compensation so that we can not only attract but retain the staff at the university? And all of us know that work in higher ed, and that's not just here in Columbia. We have Kansas City, St. Louis, and Rolla. There are many competitors or competing organizations that are attracting our staff and our faculty. So I just want to keep that in mind as we discuss what is the right industry that we should compare to. And We are a $4 billion organization that is more like University of Illinois, Iowa State, or Iowa than local hourly providers that are in our region.
I think
Go
that's
ahead,
a true
Darryl.
statement.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, Marcia, there was some discussion, I know, about the cost of transitioning to this program, costs now versus the cost of the new program. Were we planning on discussing that today? Or do we
Yeah.
have those figures?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are not prepared to discuss those yet.
Okay.
Because I think the goal here, or at least my goal, is to get this information out so that we can decide. And I think some of the materials I sent you showed you different plans and different potential costs, whether we have short-term disability or don't, have parental leave or don't, have X amount of days versus Y versus, I don't want to say those things publicly yet because we're not there. But we just have to get to a point where we're comfortable with something so that then we can bring forward a full plan for the board to consider. And so this is more conceptual and letting you understand more of the background. I think I've shared with everyone on the board different scenarios.
Okay. So we'll have the cost discussion at a future time?
Yes.
Okay.
One other quick question, and I want to, Marcia, this is meant just, I can't remember what I read. I have read, you've sent me so much material, and I greatly appreciate that. My memory is that in one of the materials you sent me, that the caregiver leave proposal would be, the university would be leading the area in offering that benefit. Did I dream that? Did I read that? I was trying to find that, and I
Right.
couldn't.
You know, I think I'll ask Aon to tell us what they're seeing. Let's get their perspective on it.
Sure. So with respect to, and I'm going to broaden the question a little bit just to address parental leave first, because it kind of leads into the caregiver leave. We've seen an incredible amount of growth with parental leave programs, and again, separate from the maternity, the recovering from the delivery, the bonding part of it. We've seen an incredible growth in not just the prevalence, but the duration of those benefits across organizations. And so once that benefit has really taken hold over the last 5, 6, 7 years and grown, the next step in that conversation is, what about the other situations, the caring for a spouse, caring for the elderly parents? And so that secondary conversation, now that the parental leave is much more established, the caregiver leave conversation is taking off. So there's an element of this conversation that is, yes, getting maybe a step ahead of the curve, that there is not a high prevalence of that benefit yet, but it is growing. And it's the conversation that most organizations are having, much like the parental leave. For the folks that put in a parental leave program back in 2015, 16, they were ahead of the curve, and now we're 5 years later, and the majority of Fortune 500 companies have parental leaves at 4 or 6 weeks, and frankly, the cutting edge or the leading organizations have expanded those parental leaves out to 8 to 12 weeks. And so there's some very generous programs out there in general industry. So part of that conversation of looking at the caregiver leave is also to acknowledge that that's where the world is headed. And if we don't consider it now, in a couple of years, as that benefit continues to gain prevalence, you're going to feel a step perhaps behind if you're not offering that. There's an element of getting ahead of the curve from an attraction and retention standpoint. So you're right, the prevalence right now, correct, is lower.
Okay, so would I be correct, and it's amazing what you just told me, that if the university implemented a caregiver leave, we would be setting a new trend in Columbia, Missouri?
I don't know about setting, but yes, you'd
Leading a new trend.
Forefront, maybe.
You'd be
Well out in front of it.
Yeah, you'd be ahead of
Thank
the
you.
curve which would give you, in our opinion, a competitive advantage in having something that others don't.
You know, I think
And we
we're-
believe that others will catch up to that.
I think today's a good example. We're testing hypothesis, right? We're all listening and trying to figure the different pieces out. But I do want to go back. I said this to you all on our call. I do think it's really important for us to talk about what our county government, our city government, state government, really think about those. I don't think our natural competitors are higher ed across the country. I think we've all emphasized that. So I think that's, I hope, an assumption that you take from today. But I think this is a good discussion to test the different hypotheses. I mean, there's some ambiguity that's built in for you all to walk out of today's conversation. I know Curator Williams will follow up on that as we want to hear more and we start coming together on what an actual program could look like.
Hey, this is Julia, and I'd like to ask a question if y'all can hear me.
We can hear you.
Oh, that's great. Technology is working. Apologies, I didn't get a chance to join a call with Aon before I left town. And I know that you mentioned a little bit earlier that all benefits plans are generally a one size fits all. And as we're talking about exempt and non-exempt, I know we spend a lot of time on the non-exempt and sort of trying to pull back what the different job levels and skills are in that group. And I'm just curious that using the framework that you've put together here with universities, generally private industry, and I think hospitals, have you seen any different benefits plans among exempt and non-exempt? And if so, what would be the sort of breakdown for each of those buckets? Just from a policy standpoint, I'd be curious to understand, because it seems like we're having a little bit harder of a time applying the benefits across the board to both of those types of employees. I'm just curious from a benefits best practices or what you're seeing in the field, are there separate benefits programs in place in other universities or larger companies, or how you've defined it in this presentation? And if so, what's the prevalence?
Yeah, this is John. I'll take a pass at that answer. Yes, we do see a difference between exempt and non-exempt. In general, if we do see differences, it's in this area. It's in leave and time away. Generally speaking, retirement benefits are going to be the same between exempt and non-exempt. Generally speaking, medical benefits are going to be the same. You're going to be offered the same sort of medical plan, dental plan, vision plan. At some organizations, it's a minority, but they will sometimes charge different premiums based on your pay, trying to subsidize and make the premiums for medical or dental coverage cheaper for lower paid employees. So sometimes we see some gradation within that, but generally speaking, healthcare benefits, it's the same plan design that everybody is offered. Life insurance benefits, often the same, although sometimes we will see a little bit of differentiation in the group life benefit that's offered. The one place where we're more apt to see a difference in benefits is the approach to time off. Generally, the holidays would be the same, but the schedule of vacation and then how that sort of spills over from vacation and potentially a PTO bank into how income is continued in a short-term disability incident, that is the other place where we'll sometimes see a difference. So it's this particular area. Otherwise, when we get out of this area of leave and disability, oftentimes those other benefits of retirement, healthcare, et cetera, are identical across exempt and non-exempt.
And then in terms of the time away, how prevalent is it to see two different plans in higher ed, private industry, hospitals?
Andy?
Yeah, and this is G. So for general industry, John mentioned, like usually it's like for finance or pharmaceutical, it's the same plan. Where we see some differences in time off will be universities or like manufacturing or retail. Within universities, the AAU, about 75% have different plans for exempt and non-exempt. For the SEC, it's more like 50-50. All right, that's why if you go to the next page, please, some of these numbers would illustrate it, where if you look at AAU, you'll see that the difference is bigger, 31 versus 36 days for exempt versus non-exempt. Whereas for SEC, because more universities have the same plan, so you'll see that the average difference is smaller, 34 versus 37. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me or Aon?
May I make a comment?
Oh,
This
yes.
is Molly Agrawal here. I just want to make sure that as the board deliberates this very important issue, we do keep in mind that the universities like mine at UMKC and UMCL, we are in very large metro areas where a competition for the workforce is with some very, very large corporations as well as some very large other higher educational institutions. So it's a little different situation there. We're competing with
some multinationals, Fortune 100 type companies as well, and that's where we lose most of our workforce too.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. I think we've been so focused in some of our conversations about centering around Columbia that we maybe have lost a little bit of that perspective of remembering that there's those environments.
Do we have to write a policy that covers all the university employees, or can we write one differently for each campus?
Historically, our benefits, it's one employer, and they have been system-wide. And from administration standpoint, I would encourage that. I might also mention, when you saw the local, that was pulled from a list of the top 50 employers in Missouri, which would have presence in Kansas City and St. Louis.
You know, we've discussed this, benefits, you know, we talk about attracting talent, and we discuss it sort of in a vacuum, but we have certain tasks that we need to have done as a university, and we have a certain amount of money to get those tasks done. Now, we can have benefits to try to attract people, or we can just say, well, our benefits may not be quite there, but we're just going to pay people more, which I think a lot of people would be equally happy with. So I think we have to kind of think about the whole. If we're trying to attract people from, in my business, when we attract people, the first question they ask isn't what's your leave policy. The first question they ask is, how much are you going to pay me? And I kind of hate to take this in isolation without thinking of the whole thing.
I agree 100% with what he says.
I think we all agree, and I think Curator Holbrook and I've had a lot of talks about this. And I think we're trying to marry the two. I can tell you more in a closed session about that and how it's working, but we can't figure out one until we know the other, and we can't do one until, this is kind of a Ryan Rapp answer, you know. Well, no.
Well, he would say we can't do either.
Well, because I mean, Ryan would tell me, I can't put more in this bucket until I've realized what's coming out of this bucket. And so we have some thoughts on that, and I think Curator Holbrook had a great, you know, kind of epiphany moment for me, and then I talked to Ryan about it, and we still have to fix one of these buckets first.
And to your point, I agree with the wage thing, the wage issue. And going back to your proposal, you know, the step up is from, 5 years, and you're proposing to lower it to 3 years. Though the folks that have been working for 3 years, and you give them an extra additional days of leave, I don't think that's going to affect their behavior, quite honestly. We are going through changes in the workplace that we don't understand. There's big changes. I mean, we've got staffing vacancies, and everyone that I've talked to in the leadership yesterday at an orientation for this campus has vacancies that they're struggling to fill. The hospital, last week at the hospital committee meeting, they talked about it. Everyone is doing industry, higher ed. We don't really know yet what's causing it. But the idea that we can tweak it and just say, okay, well, instead of getting your extra days at after a 5-year tenure here and being a good worker for the university and doing a good job, well, we're just going to give you that extra days at 3 years. To me, you know, that's just guessing at if it works or not, because I go back to what Todd said, that it's not really the days off, it's what's in their paycheck.
I might add, we don't intend for leave to solve all the problems or be the solution for everything, and I think the points of being in balance are excellent ones. I mean, at the end of the day, really what's our guiding principle. We want to be a great place to work. And there's a lot of things that go into being a great place to work. It's having colleagues that you enjoy working with, it's having a fair market competitive benefit package, and it's being paid fairly. And so as a university, our strategy is to work on all of those things. And I think it's true, if we're overinflated in an area and we're not getting the benefit from it, then that means we're under in another area. So that's why this is a very important puzzle to address all of those areas. But I will say, and I just want to reiterate what President Choi said, we have excellent employees who work very hard, and the part I'm most proud of is just their commitment to the mission, which the mission is healthcare, it's Missourians, it's students, and getting to come to work every day with purpose-driven people is a benefit, and that's one that I want us to keep.
Maybe one other comment about the leave and the role that it plays is that I think we'd all agree that people aren't coming specifically for the leave, but if something were broken or missing from the leave program, it might be one less reason to stay. So again, it's not going to be the driving factor, but could it be a contributing, factor or reason in people's decision to turn over and leave and go elsewhere? Yeah, it's not the driving force, but it'll be a factor.
Any more questions? Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to my second action item. I move that the Governance, Compensation, and Human Resources Committee go into executive session later today for the reasons stated in the meeting notice. Can I have a second?
Second.
Cindy, will you do a roll call of the committee, please?
Curator Burnsick,
Yes.
Curator Holloway,
Yes.
Curator Winokur,
Yes.
Curator Williams.
Yes.
Okay, you have all votes in favor.
Thank you, Cindy. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Governance, Compensation, and Human Resources Committee for public session.
Thank you, Curator Williams. It was a good discussion. Curator Graves, I now turn it over to you for the Academic, Student Affairs, Research, and Economic Development Committee meeting.
All right, today the committee has two actions. The first is a new degree program proposal for a Master of Science in Financial Technology at UMSL. The second is a resolution for a closed session of the committee. We will begin with the degree proposal. It's already at the lectern. Our first action this morning is a new degree program proposal for a Master of Science in Financial Technology at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Joan Phillips, Dean of UMSL's College of Business Administration, is here today to tell us more about the proposal.
Thank you, Curator Graves, and good morning. I'm delighted to present our proposal for an MS in Financial Technology, or FinTech. FinTech is a broad term of technology that aims to automate, improve, and structurally shift financial services using tools such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, and data analytics. Although I have the privilege of presenting to you today, I really want to acknowledge the hard work done by our Department Chair of Finance, Dr. Nasser Ashardi, and our Associate Provost, Dr. Amber Reinhart, and they're both with us today. In order to be brief, I really want to touch on 4 points. And point number 1 is why I believe it's important for UMSL to offer this MS FinTech and why now. At the heart of our public urban research mission is a commitment to align our degree programs with the economic development needs of the region. And last year, Greater St. Louis, Inc., the region's economic development collaborative, released its Jobs 2030 plan for St. Louis. And it notes that the St. Louis economy will be shaped by growth in 3 next-generation sectors. FinTech was the first, geospatial was the second, and agritech was a third. And just as one example, Square, now known as Block, one of the largest fintech firms in St. Louis, is expanding its operations in St. Louis, and there are plans for a fintech innovative district north of the city. And so that brings me to the second point that I want to emphasize is that our programs will be addressing the workforce development needs of the region. 70 to 80% of UMSL College of Business alums stay in the region, and it is their leadership that will be instrumental in driving the inclusive and economic prosperity for the region. So it's important that we support them with our degree offerings so that they can pursue careers that support these next generation sectors, including fintech. The next point is that this degree program will support UMSL in terms of both enrollment and net revenue. Similar to our most recent specialty master's degree in the College of Business and Supply Chain and Cybersecurity, we anticipate that we'll reach a steady state enrollment of 25 to 30 students per year in what is an 18 to 20 month program, depending on the student's cadence. All of the classes will be available online, and all of the classes will be offered through Missouri Online as well. And so we forecast a small positive margin in year one of about $64,000 and a cumulative net margin of just over $1 million in year six. And finally, how we're able to achieve this is the fourth point, is that we will be utilizing existing resources within the college and university. This will be added to what is a portfolio within the College of Business of specialty master's and graduate degree programs. So we anticipate no needed resources because there is existing capacity in our recruiting, advising, and faculty teams. And in fact, we don't anticipate any even new faculty, even adjunct faculty, until enrollments would exceed 50, and then we would use part-time adjunct faculty. So I'm happy to present this, and I welcome your questions.
Questions from the committee or anyone else?
I'm sorry. I want to apologize beforehand because I did not make a phone call to ask this question to get you prepared. I'm not trying to play I got you. I just was lazy and didn't do my homework, but I've got to ask. On your financial analysis, you show that your reoccurring costs are $10,000. I read in the write-up that you using existing staff and all those. I understand the university probably is not going to see any additional cost to the operations. However, I am concerned when you're telling me people are going to teach it, but you're not charging the course to teach that, and it doesn't give me an idea to understand the offering of the course, what it does. Am I making sense for what I'm saying? Even though you're not hiring a new staff, somebody's got to teach this course. Somebody has to do some work.
Actually, most of the courses have already been developed and are being taught, but they're being taught as electives rather than as part of an existing program. So our hiring, this has been an idea that was conceived 2 years ago, and we've really started implementing and designing this program in line with other offerings in other regions within the country that have shown success in this area. And it was really part of the Jobs 2030 plan that says we need to have a more formalized offering so that these areas of expertise that we're providing our students would be recognized by the market and the employers.
Okay, so let me put this in Hobrock English again to make sure I understand it. What I heard you say is that everything you need to get this master's degree is already being taught at the campus, so we're not teaching anything new, and those people that take these courses, when you take them all together, if they elect them, if you've taken this series of courses, we can offer you this master's degree? Is that
Well, I don't understand the question, but these courses have already been approved, they're on their books, and they're being taught. They may not be taught in the same cadence.
the same what?
The same offerings. In other words, instead of it being offered once every couple years, it might be offered every semester in order to meet the needs of the degree program. So we already offer a certificate. And so, for example, we have a fundamentals in fintech class with a fall enrollment of already 34. Okay, but we're not offering a degree program in this area, but it's classes that students are taking as part of our portfolio of other programs where they can take it as an elective or an emphasis area, let's say within the flexible MBA program.
So we may have to offer these courses more often.
I don't have the schedule in front of me, but these courses are being offered, and it supplements some of the other standard. It's a combination of our standard finance classes as well as the technology classes. So yes, some of these classes will be offered more frequently.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. How do you determine the demand for a particular degree?
Yeah. So I'm a marketing research professor by training, so I'm big on using market research. We've used burning glass data, but that didn't have the specific CIP code. So we're fortunate that the curators or the sponsored an additional Eduvantis report that looked at the degree offerings within other areas where fintech has been very successful. There are 2 programs in Boston that are both awarding over 100 degrees a year. University of Connecticut is another degree that's offering a degree with conferring over 100 degrees in a year. And so that's what we took a look at. There's no other fintech program within this region. And St. Louis itself is, there's indexes and rankings. And out of over 200 cities and 65 countries, St. Louis already ranks 26 in fintech. And outside of Manhattan, it has the most number of financial services firms in the country. So there's a great need. Just if I tried this last night, just Googling fintech within the St. Louis Business Journal, and I think it was 285 articles popped up, most of them announcing new leadership within the fintech initiative.
So you believe this is in demand, and also this is about innovation and about the new ways to do financial.
Absolutely. Just last night, when I looked into it, 18 firms within the St. Louis region are looking for people within the fintech, using fintech blockchain within the St. Louis region, looking for talent.
So I'm assuming that you've had companies come and tell you they're interested in this versus you saying you want to offer it, and would you be interested, looking by the letters and the amount of support you have in St. Louis?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, if there are no further discussion, may I have a motion second from the committee that the new Master of Science in Financial Technology at the University of Missouri St. Louis be approved?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, the motion carries. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Academic Student Affairs, Research, and Economic Development Committee, I move to recommend to the full board that a new Master of Science in Financial Technology at the University of Missouri St. Louis be approved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion on the topic? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Back to you, Curator Graves.
Our last action item this morning is for an executive session of the committee. I would now entertain a motion and a second from the committee to hold a committee meeting in closed session this afternoon.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion second. Cindy, do we need to call the roll on that? Would you do that?
Curator Graves,
Yes.
Curator Hobrock,
Yes.
Curator Lehman,
Yes.
Curator Winokur.
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor.
Okay, thank you, Curator Graves. Curator Holloway, I now turn it over to you for the Audit, Compliance, and Ethics Committee meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Today, the Audit, Compliance, and Ethics Committee has one information item and one action item. The information item is the fiscal year 2022 Internal Audit, Compliance, and Ethics Annual Report. Michelle Pirano, who is our Chief Audit and Compliance Officer, will present the fiscal year audit, compliance, and ethics annual report. Michelle will highlight the audit and compliance work completed during the fiscal year 2022, and a full report is available to you in your audit and our committee materials. And so with that, Michelle.
Thank you, Curator Holloway. I'm happy to review with you this morning the work completed this past year. And this slide is a snapshot of our fiscal year 2022 internal audit plan final status. The 27% completed represents 8 consulting and audit engagements, and the 24% in process represents 7 audits. For 4 of the 7 audits in process, we are already working with management to finalize action plans and anticipate these audits will be completed by early August. We also completed 14 investigations in fiscal year 2022 and are currently working 9 investigations. This slide details the coverage across the system by audits, consulting engagements, and investigations. And this also includes the in-process audits. This is the summary of the work completed since our April 2022 Ethics and Compliance Audit Committee meeting. We completed the risk assessment and assisted the Office of General Counsel in the HIPAA hybrid covered entity designations. We are finalizing report and management actions for 4 audits, completing field work for 1 audit, and planning is in process for 1 audit. We completed 7 investigations and are currently working 9. This slide lists the highlights in our 3 compliance focus areas we were able to complete in this past year. Solid progress has been achieved in cybersecurity. The System Chief Information Security Officer is a strong partner with System Compliance as she continues to share progress made in maturing the information security program and has made impressive progress to ensure that we will have the certified research space required in the next few years to continue doing different levels of classified research. We completed the Graham-Leach-Bliley gap analysis and determined the biggest opportunity is to centrally manage this program again. So System Compliance is now responsible for this, and the Director of Compliance is working to refocus this effort and support the staff accountable for the work. We were approved for a privacy officer, so once this person is hired, they will establish a privacy program for higher education and conduct similar gap analysis for other areas governed by data regulations. Research compliance teams across the system are working together as we address the areas of export controls and undue foreign influence, and we have identified opportunities for targeted education, collaborated with finance to implement controls that will stop payments to embargoed countries, and are developing guidance on requirements for addressing undue foreign influence and a sanction policy. So this slide is the progress we've made in developing a more formal training and education plan. So you can see we will have our annual code of conduct training will be rolled out this fall with an attestation. We're working on export controls for principal investigators, simply so they understand what are the expectations, when should you contact someone, and who to contact in the organization. Same with Graham-Leach-Bliley Act for those units responsible. We'll be rolling out importance of the Speak Up culture and fraud awareness to everyone, and we're working on an in-depth module on fraud that all personnel with financial responsibilities will be required to take. This slide highlights the monitoring and auditing that we are putting in place or already have in place. We will be doing some monitoring of youth programs to ensure that the requirements and standards that we expect are being upheld in the summer camps. We are monitoring research grants and also IP addresses hitting the system networks from sanctioned countries and improvements related to higher education information security program. The 7 elements of an effective compliance program will continue to be built out as we build our understanding of current state in each of the compliance risk areas, and we map that against where we need to be. So that concludes the annual report portion of this presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions before I move on forward with the fiscal year 23 risk assessment and proposed plans.
Any questions for Michelle from the board? Thank you then. Go ahead and proceed.
Thank you. So I now present for approval the proposed fiscal year 2023 risk assessment and internal audit and compliance plans. A key responsibility for internal audit and compliance is updating our rolling audit plan for the purpose of aligning our resources to the areas of most concern at this point in time. And the most important leadership responsibilities are the continuous decisions needed about allocation of financial capital and human resources in a manner that achieves the missions, capitalizes on opportunity, and reasonably mitigates risk. Any organization must take measured risk if it wants to capitalize on opportunity. So I want to highlight two external trends and a strategic objective that were considered as part of the development of the fiscal year 23 proposed internal audit and compliance plans. The changing work landscape impacts both financial and human resources. And according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, 47.8 million workers voluntarily quit their jobs in 2021 without having another job lined up. This trend is challenging all organizations with fluctuating staff levels, acquiring and keeping talent, and rising labor costs that are impacting profitability targets. As we know, there are many economic headwinds now challenging a strong job market, so the impact of this trend is still unfolding. With higher education and healthcare institutions possessing substantial amounts of personally identifiable information and protected health information, an effective cybersecurity strategy and privacy program is necessary for reducing the likelihood of breaches and for building a reputation as a trustworthy institution for protecting personal information and proprietary research information. And equally important is the ability to be flexible and creative in our approaches to protecting information while moving forward with innovative business strategies for meeting our missions. More states are establishing privacy rights for their residents, and the federal government keeps expanding the focus of privacy requirements. This is an area we need to continually monitor and adjust as regulations change. And research is a major strategic focus for the entire system. We need to continue building out the research infrastructure to support researchers in securing funding, reducing administrative tasks, and meeting research compliance obligations by building into researchers' natural workflows. So the FY23 proposed internal audit plan is focused on areas critical to good financial stewardship through internal audits focused on financial accountability in the colleges and schools across all four universities. Also through a consulting engagement to provide information to leadership for optimizing research compliance structures between MU Health and the MU campus. This engagement will be shaped by the leadership on both sides. The plan also includes work to inform the continuing efforts to build the system-wide compliance program, particularly through an export controls gap analysis at the universities and the health system. And information technology audits focused on information security and the effectiveness of IT governance. We are completing the second full year of work to establish the system-wide compliance program. The report details the work we have scheduled in fiscal year 23 by each of these 7 effective elements of a compliance program. In addition to establishing the foundational elements, we will continue our work in the risk area of cybersecurity, data regulations, and research compliance to understand gaps in policy and our practices. And we are adding another area this year, environmental health and safety. And by addressing these gaps, we can reduce exposure, improve early detection, and continue building the network of compliance professionals across the system who partner with us in this important work. I can't thank enough all of the compliance people on the different campuses that work with us. We couldn't do it without their assistance. So this slide highlights that activity of the focus areas for fiscal year 23. So our key takeaways for these plans is we have an internal audit plan focused in the areas of financial stewardship, cybersecurity, and research compliance. And we have a compliance plan focused on continuing to establish the foundational elements, building partnerships with compliance professionals, reinforcing a speak-up culture, and continuing work in the focus areas of cybersecurity, data regulations, research, compliance, and environmental health and safety. So this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from other curators? I must say that meeting with Michelle, oh, was there a question? That this is one of the many departments within the university that has a tremendous amount of work that's never seen. But the cybersecurity, the HIPAA, the privacy, you know, with the modern age of the World Wide Web and the computers at every desk and the computers you have in your hand, it's just, it's a portal for the not so pleasant players to enter our realm. So it's a big job, and I appreciate what she's done. It's as you delve into it, it's very important work, and I appreciate what you've done and your team has done, very much so.
Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, you know, we need to, may I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve the fiscal year risk assessment, proposed internal audit, and compliance plans as presented to you and outlined in this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay?
And Keith, just to add on to what you said, I know how big of a task this has been that was given to you, Michelle, and from implementing a code of conduct, which is a big task, to rolling out a full-blown compliance program around cyber. It's a huge endeavor, and I just wanted to thank you for all the work you've done in a short amount of time.
Thank you, Curator Brunsick.
It's kind of interesting for you to be here, but we can't see you. But thank you for your comment. I'm looking at this thing over here, and it doesn't look quite like you, Julie. I mean, it's just a little different. So, can you call the roll of the committee for the vote? We had a motion and a second. So, Cindy.
Yes. Curator Brunsick?
Yes.
Curator Holloway?
Yes.
Curator Lehman?
Yes.
All vote, committee votes in favor.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Audit, Compliance, and Ethics Committee, I move to recommend to the full board the fiscal year 2023 risk assessment and proposed internal audit and compliance plans as presented to you now, outlined in materials at the meeting, be approved.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Anything else, Curator Holloway?
I don't think that I have anything else for today.
Okay, thank you very much. Curator Winokur, I now turn it over to you for the Health Affairs report.
Thank you. Good morning. The Health Affairs Committee met on June 16th. We had 5 information items and 1 action item. Dr. Rick Barron, Executive Vice Chancellor of Health Affairs, will present a summary of the presentations for us this morning. And from these reports, you will continue to see the accomplishment and opportunities for MU Healthcare, the School of Medicine, and NextGen. Dr. Barron.
Good afternoon, curators. Thank you very much. And here is the agenda for today's briefing from the Health Affairs Committee that Curator Winokur has asked me to give. So let's start with graduation. Graduation is always a very exciting event. It closes out the academic year at the School of Medicine. It also served to celebrate Dean Zweig's contributions as dean over the last several years. There were 110 members of the School of Medicine class of 2022, and our students matched at outstanding universities and residencies throughout the country. In addition, 30% of them will stay right here at MUHC for their residencies. So we're so proud of all of these students, now medical doctors, and it was simply a wonderful day. I want to emphasize part of the day, which really was very interesting to me. So we enjoyed an excellent commencement address by a Missouri native, Dr. Bob Phillips. Bob is a member of the National Academy of Medicine, and he's nationally known as an expert in rural health services research, and health policy. He's a product of our system, having completed his undergraduate degree at Missouri S&T and his medical residency and fellowship at Mizzou. Also a speaker on that day was Dr. Amy Hemberger, who is an outstanding clinician, clinical trialist, and a trailblazer in immune therapies for brain tumors. She was named to the National Cancer Advisory Board, which plays an important role in advising and assisting the director of the National Cancer Institute at the NIH. So she's another wonderful example of the success of our educational system. She was undergrad at Mizzou. Dr. Phillips came from Dixon, and Dr. Hemberger from Rolla, two nearby rural communities. So it was interesting. They didn't know each other until the event, but they had a similar circle of friends from growing up in rural Missouri. And so they were able to reminisce about common friends at the graduation. And to me, it underscored the strength of our students from rural Missouri. And it reminded me of a quote that I've heard Provost Ramshan say before. No matter where our graduates go next, we know that they bring with them skills from a world-class education, and I couldn't agree more. So it's with great pleasure and excitement, I want to emphasize excitement, that I announced the selection of Dr. Dave Arnold as the new Next Gen Executive Director at the Health, and I announced this at the Health Affairs Committee. Bringing Dr. Arnold to Mizzou demonstrates how incredibly valuable our support from the president and the provost are in being able to bring and attract world-class, up-and-coming biomedical precision health leaders. Dr. Arnold is an outstanding example of what the magnet NextGen is serving to bring a clinician scientist of this caliber to our research community. Let me share with you a bit about Dave. He did his undergrad degree at the University of the Cumberlands in Kentucky, and he got his medical degree from Louisville, and then he went into physical medicine and rehabilitation as a specialty, and he did that in Louisville also. He then did a neuromuscular fellowship at The Ohio State University, where he's been for his whole career, and he has multiple appointments in PM&R, cell biology, neuroscience, and neurology. His area of expertise is in aging, and he's trying to understand why muscle cells shrink and atrophy and why we get weaker as we get older, and he's using that as a platform to understand the whole aging process. So he's really evolved as a scientist over his career, and so it's just going to be tremendous to have him here. He's an avid athlete, and he enjoys sports, including running, swimming, and triathlons. And when you meet him, ask him about one of his goals, and that's to swim the English Channel, which he apparently has scheduled to do in the next couple of years. So we'll have to check his insurance when he does that. This love of sport carries over to his wife, Angie, and their two children, Maddie and Liam. They're excited about moving to Columbia and taking advantage of all the resources we have in Missouri and Columbia. So the Arnold family will be moving here to Columbia in early fall. So I wanted to share with you a couple of examples of how I see the next-gen researchers complementing our clinical expertise. So in the Roy Blunt next-gen building and other MU labs around the campus, we have an amazing group of tumor immunology scientists. Some of these scientists have been here for a few years. Some have just arrived. The ones in bold have just recently arrived or are coming in the next couple of weeks. We already heard earlier about Dr. Sherwan and Yolsu, and they arrived about the time I got here 2 years ago. This research that these tumor immunologists can do can lead to breakthroughs in cancer that will lead in improved outcomes. So at the top of the list is Dr. Hildebrandt, our new director of Ellis Fischel Cancer Center, and his subspecialty area is bone marrow transplantation involving the immune system, and he arrives next week. He joins this list of tumor immunology researchers, so he'll immediately bring the scientific expertise of these tumor immunologists to the clinic. And he'll be able to tie in this strong science in the next-gen building to the clinical enterprise, and particularly to the bone marrow transplant unit that he is going to build here at MU, which we don't currently have. Another example that that I wanted to emphasize is in Next Gen is our reproduction biology focus. We've been very successful in large part due to the incredible efforts by our Vice Chancellor of Research, Tom Spencer, in hiring 4 outstanding researchers in reproductive biology. Much of this research focuses on the important issues of infertility that affects many Missourians. So simultaneously with the recruitment of these amazing hires, and there's actually another one that Dr. Spencer and Goodman are working on. So simultaneously, as we reported to this group and to the HAC before, we've recruited a new chairman of OBGYN, Dr. Gene Goodman. And all the scientists in this slide are faculty in the clinical department of OBGYN. Dr. Goodman's a nationally known maternal fetal specialist, and she's going to be working closely with these scientists. And this group will blend our research with outstanding clinical care, and that's, to me, is extremely exciting and really will make us thought leaders in this area nationally. So on the clinical side, we really have had an aggressive recruitment agenda to hire new physicians across the spectrum, but particularly in these 4 focus areas. Every week, I now sit on a review committee that reviews new proposals for clinicians throughout the enterprise, and who are recruited and hired through the tight relationship between MUHC and the School of Medicine. So we're just moving ahead very strongly on both the research front and the clinical front. So on the infrastructure front, the new children's hospital continues to rise from the ground. In order to accommodate the change of pediatric services to the main campus prior to the opening of the hospital in 2024, we've had to be flexible and creative. We plan to open a temporary emergency room for pediatric entrance by August. And we are maximizing our current space in our current hospital buildings to create 87 new beds in the existing chassis before we even open the new building. And we've already opened up 45 of those beds to take care of our sick patients. So our hospital team has just done an amazing job in getting creative to accommodate this transition phase. I wanted to say a couple words about rural health. We're aggressively pursuing a renewed rural strategy for healthcare delivery and education. So I've named a rural health task force that will be giving me recommendations of short, medium, and long-term steps for this plan by the end of the summer. On the short-term horizon, we plan to open a clinic in Mexico by the end of the summer, and in Boonville, the clinic will open in spring of 2023. And we continue to look for other opportunities to extend our practice and care into rural Missouri. Marshall Stewart and Extension and I are working very closely on one of the long-term projects to try to deliver research clinical trials to rural Missouri as well. So this graph shows our financial performance for FY22. And as you can see, it's been a very challenging year. We're not meeting our projected goals, and this is largely due to unprecedented labor expenses due to COVID. And this has already been alluded to in multiple presentations today. And it's hit the healthcare system particularly hard, particularly in the area of nursing. The second source of why we're not hitting our projected targets has to do with drug reimbursement. And I don't want to get into this too weedy, so I've reduced it down to these bullet points. And there's really 2 parts to this. We can no longer get preferred lower drug costs through Medicaid. And this was a decision made by the Medicaid agency, but with consultation and from CMS, and this change occurred at the state level after we had made our budget last year. So we don't have a lot of control over that. In addition, specialty pharmacies for chemotherapy drugs and the new drugs to treat autoimmune disease, which are just, and neurodegenerative disease, which are just life-saving, but extremely expensive. So the specialty pharmacies which distribute these are making it more difficult to us to get preferred pricing for non-Medicaid patients. And so we can't fix the state policy easily, but we're working with the pharmacies to correct the second drug expense problem, and we're hope to get a lot of these savings back in the upcoming fiscal year. So this slide shows our projected 2023 budget, and we're providing two scenarios because of the volatile labor and medical supply situation that I've indicated. So we project a range of operating income from $60 million to $83 million. And in order to improve our operating margin from FY22, we know that we have to deal with several issues that are listed on this slide, and I've alluded to in the last slide as well. So our growing healthcare footprint, particularly into subspecialty areas, will improve our situation. And as I said in our weekly recruitment sessions for doctors to come into MUHC, we're focusing very strongly on subspecialists in multiple areas. We continue to work with the specialty pharmacies to enable us to receive a more favorable drug pricing to treat conditions like cancer, autoimmune disease, and some neurologic diseases. And we're focused on trying to find new ways to control our labor and medical supply expenses. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I hope this information has been useful.
Questions from the board? Go ahead, Curator Holloway.
I just wanted to say that you're, as Robin calls you, the recruitment whisperer. The talent that the next gen and your efforts and the efforts of all the MU Healthcare folks, the success there has been remarkable. We just approved the building out of the fourth floor. That's way ahead of schedule. So hopefully the innovation and the research that we're doing there is going to be additional life-changing work, you know, for the state of Missouri and for the public in general. But thank you very much for all your recruitment and all the top talent that you're bringing to our university.
Well, thank you, Curator Holloway, and it's clearly been a team effort. And I would just want to reemphasize, our Vice Chancellor of Research, Dr. Spencer, and I are spending most of our days working on recruitment with our large teams, and it's been going very well. And that's why I wanted to point out those two examples of how bringing in bench scientists, people always wonder, how is that going to lead to improved health? And you can't predict, like the nuclear reactor investment made decades ago, but we think that we're going to be able to see some return on that soon.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Barron has put together an amazing team under the leadership of President Choi, so echo that. The only action of the Health Affairs Committee was to approve the minutes of the April 14th meeting, which was unanimously approved by the committee last Thursday. I want to thank Dr. Barron and the MU Health team. Additionally, we've added a report at each meeting at the Health Affairs Committee this year from each university in the University of Missouri system regarding academic medicine and the medical research being conducted on their campus. Excuse me. Last week, we had a great report from Mizzou School of Health Professions highlighting their enrollment growth, signature hires, increase in research expenditures, and 100% licensure and certification pass rate by their graduates in recent years. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the business of the Health Affairs Committee. Thank you, Dr. Barron.
Okay, thank you, Curator Winokur. So that concludes the morning session of our meeting. We're now going to break for lunch, at which time we'll have the pleasure to visit with students from here at Mizzou in North 214. That's North 214, just upstairs. Enjoy interacting with the students and each other. We'll plan to reconvene the board meeting. I'm going to give us 30 minutes for lunch since we're running behind instead of 45. So we're going to get back here at 12:20. So be back here at 12:20, and we will reconvene. We'll also cut down on our strategic theme discussion by a few minutes so that we get back on track, okay? So we'll see you back here at 12:20. Enjoy the lunch, and take care.